Ich möchte Sie jetzt herzlich begrüßen zum
I would
zweiten
like
Panel
to
unserer
greet
Konferenz
you for the second panel of this
der
conference,
dringenden Notwendigkeit einer neuen
urgent
internationalen Sicherheits-
necessity
und
of a new
Entwicklungsarchitektur,
world
das Ende von 500 Jahren
development and
Kolonialismus.
security
Wir machen
architecture,
mit dem
the end
zweiten
of 500
Panel
years of
weiter. Wir haben
colonialism.
kleine Veränderungen, wie Sie
We
sich schon
move
denken
on
können, da der
from
Morgen
the
ja auch schon
second
etwas
panel.
umgestellt wurde,
As
aber es bleibt spannend, es bleibt
you
sehr, sehr
might have
interessant. Wir haben
suspected,
viele
there will be small
interessante
changes
Beiträge. Wir
in the
werden in der
sequence
am
of
Ende
events as
natürlich
we
wieder
had
auch
this
eine
morning.
Diskussionsrunde haben wie vorhin.
We will have after
Und
the
dort wird
presentations a
auch
round
dann
of
noch Pino
discussions,
Arlaki, der heute
and
Morgen zu
we'll
uns gesprochen
have
hat, auch wieder
Pino Arlaki
höchstwahrscheinlich mit
with
dabei
us,
sein, sodass wir ihn
hopefully,
auch dann noch in die Diskussion
so that we can
mit
integrate him in
einbeziehen können.
a discussion.
Wir planen, dass
We plan
allerspätestens bis um 18 Uhr, das ist das
that at
äußerste
the
Limit,
latest
den
at
zweiten Panel zu beenden, weil, wie
6
Sie
p.m.
wissen, ich hoffe, Sie haben sich das
this
schon alle
panel will end,
genommen, wir heute Abend ja
because,
noch ein
as you may
wunderbares
know,
Konzert
we
und
will have
andere
a
Beiträge,
wonderful
poetische Beiträge
concert and
zum Dialog der
political
Zivilisationen
presentations
haben werden. Und
as part of a
davor muss
dialogue of
eben dann natürlich
civilizations,
das alles hier auch entsprechend noch
and
vorbereitet werden.
we'll have to rearrange the room
Ich
a little
möchte
bit
jetzt
for
keine
that.
weiteren
So I
Worte
don't want
verlieren.
to
Wir
spend
fangen
more
an mit
time
der
on
ersten
introductions.
Rede.
We'll start with the
Das
first
Thema ist ja
presentation.
Souveränität und Konsens der
Our
Regierten.
uh,
Und ich glaube, es gibt
theme is
niemanden besseren, der zu diesem
sovereignty and consents
Panel
of the
zu Anfang
governed,
sprechen
and I
kann,
don't
als
think
Jacques
there's anyone
Cheminade aus
who's more fit
Frankreich.
to
Er ist
open
ehemaliger
this
Präsidentschaftskandidat.
panel,
Er ist der
which is
Präsident der
Jacques Cheminade,
Partei Solidarité
three
et Progrès.
times
Und er
presidential
wird
candidate
sprechen
in
über das
France,
Thema
and
ein
he's the
Neubeginn
president of
zur
Solidarité et
Verhinderung des
Progrès,
Aussterbens der
and he
Menschheit.
talks
Jacques,
about
bitte komm hierher. Dankeschön.
a new beginning to prevent the extinction of humanity. He will speak in English, so
hello to all of you. A new beginning to prevent the extinction of humanity. The title of my presentation refers to a financial and ideological system that breeds war and promotes a culture of death. What's happening in Gaza, Iran, Ukraine, and Sudan are expression of the same criminal matrix. It is Marco Rubio praising Western history in its colonial dimension in Munich, concluding that its supremacy must be expressed through force. It is Charles III and Benjamin Netanyahu receiving lengthy applause, a standing ovation, in the US Congress, one displaying a map of Greater Israel, and the other asserting that American independence was inspired by ideas of British origin, quickly endorsed by Donald Trump, whose Greater America stretches from Greenland to the Tierra del Fuego. It is US Secretary of War Peter Hegseth, or Donald Trump's spiritual advisor Paula White, proclaiming that God blesses those who wage a just war by assassinating civilians and the heads of state of the Iranian enemy. Thus grows a new fascism, whose source is British imperialism and the principle of ruling through fear. This imperialism is currently mutating in the United States, taking the form of an alliance between the tech lords of Silicon Valley, who are now expanding their operations to Nevada and Texas, the lords of Silicon Valley, who are now expanding their operations, and the lords of Wall Street, who are promoting a financial dollar that has nothing to do with the dollar of the American people, a fake currency issued by electronic impulses and decoupled from the physical economy. It is a techno-military financial fascist system with its media outlets that claims to dominate the world by abolishing democracy that, for them, has become an obstacle, as the leaders of Palantir and Microsoft openly proclaim. Their only contribution to the real economy in the United States, as in Western Europe, is the financing of the defense sector linked to artificial intelligence and the extraction of rare metals needed for modern weapons. This is 1.5 trillion allocated by Donald Trump for this purpose. Cyber nuclear war is their horizon. Meanwhile, the City of London continues to launder and whitewash and clean the increasingly dirty money from the tax havens. We are notably way beyond a Cold War, plunged now into a geopolitical logic that, if we do not halt its course, will lead to monstrous destruction, threatening to annihilate humanity. We all know here that we must change course. And, as being said and repeated this morning, we know that a new architecture of peace through mutual development and security is a key to change, to this immediate and necessary change. I would like to make 3 points here. The first is to emphasize that this system, linked to war crimes, is a mafia-like system of organized crime. It functions as an instrument of destruction of life, a war against the peoples. In this sense, the Epstein case is merely the tip of a bloody iceberg. The second point is that this is not a Western inevitability. On the contrary, it is a betrayal of the best that the West has brought to the world. It is a metastasis that we have allowed to grow until it took control of the whole body. Finally, to participate in this new architecture, we must change the way we act and think. That is, explore our human capacities beyond a formal logic reduced to deduction and induction. Einstein tells us that we can never solve a problem within the terms in which it was posed. Today, our challenge is to educate our emotions to align themselves with this human capacity to transcend formal limits for the common good, drawing inspiration from those who have succeeded in doing so in the past and following their approach. First point, this destructive system is not based on the consent of the governed, but on their violation, on their systematic violation. It is the law of the strongest, the true face of a rule-based order. Just as every form of colonialism had its code noir, special code, organizing slavery, today, as partners in the global archipelago of money laundering, governments, local mafias, banking firms, and transnational corporations engaged in the plundering of the common good with complete impunity or even in full compliance with it, in full compliance with the law. They have their own rules and the financial hitmen tasked with enforcing them, as John Perkins demonstrated in his Confessions. This organized financial criminal capitalism does indeed have its own rules of the game. It sustains lavish lifestyle and contributes to the financing and corruption of the political parties and leaders best positioned to keep the system as it is and make it worse. This system that is so favorable to them, this system with its law. Its law is a widespread theft of the fruits of human labor and shared wealth, leading to widespread corruption. It is therefore not only individuals who cheat the system rules, the rules of the system, the rules of the game. It's not only this individual that must be targeted, but an entire globalized system that has become mafia-like from top to bottom. Only the momentum of a new architecture will be capable of curbing and then putting an end to this system, a definite end. The Ivorian leader, Houphouët-Boigny, who was accused of corruption, once declared on his country's television that he was indeed corrupt. He admitted it, but that to change things, one had rather to target the system of the corruptors. Second point, the accusation leveled against the behavior of Western countries is amply justified, but throws out the conceptual and human contributions developed in the West. It throws them out with the dirty waters of it throws out the baby of the best of the West with the dirty waters of the colonial order. Western countries, United States as well as members of the European Union, have betrayed their intellectual and moral message by becoming predators. Lyndon LaRouche, with his Science of Christian Economics, laid the foundations of this message of the best. I do not have time to elaborate, but the point is that every human being is created in the image of God and is therefore capable of becoming a creator. Imago viva Dei and capax Dei. Nicholas of Cusa, the greatest thinker of the dawn of the Renaissance, emphasized this capacity and wrote De Pace Fidei, a dialogue among believers of various religions, concluding that through different paths, understanding was both possible and necessary because adherence to a creative thinking was found in each of them. A one humanity, as Elke Zepp-LaRouche stressed this morning. In the shared creative principle that allows us to escape the inevitability of a deadly Tower of Babel, and by working together for a common good, to achieve détente, understanding, and cooperation, escaping a logic of power and domination. The mere will to power exercised at the expense of the others. This is the foundation of our OSCE plan, these principles, for Southwest Asia and of the new international financial architecture indispensable for peace, based on the coincidence of the opposites, as now Leo XIV affirmed in his address during the Jubilee, following the path opened by Leo XIII's Rerum Novarum and the encyclicas of their successors. I would add that France should pull itself together and play its part for two reasons. The first is that it was the great humanist Lefebvre d'Etaples who had the complete works of Nicolas of Cusa printed in 1514, producing a collective international edition in cooperation with all European humanists. The second reason is that in 1890, Algiers' toast, Cardinal Lavigerie, Archbishop of Algiers and Carthago, a personal friend of Leo XIII and an advocate against slavery and the excesses of colonization, conveyed through this toast the Pope's acceptance of the secular republic. Leo XIV's recent trip to Algeria took place within this historical context of dialogue and peace among religions. His call for peace condemned the bombing of civilian populations and called on all religions and even non-believers to unite for the cause of peace. Recall that on the plane taking him to Algiers, he declared in response to Trump's attacks that Trump's administration did not frighten them and that his mission is to bear witness of the Gospels. Let us add two fundamental points regarding this second issue. On the occasion of the 250th anniversary of American independence. The first is that the founders of the United States rebelled against British colonialism, and that is this liberation that must be celebrated as it will be by all our friends and comrades. Soon, they would celebrate it soon. America is not a fundamentally Anglo-Saxon country, but a nation that freed itself from British colonial occupation and at its core is a melting pot of immigrants who came there seeking a better life and human dignity. The interests of British imperialism have always sought to reoccupy the United States, first militarily, and then, following their failure, in a cultural and financial form, culminating today in the form of a new military financial fascism, which acts as an occupying power within its own republic. Third point, changing the way we think. We are enduring what is not only a war against peoples, for the criminal oligarchy is by its very nature Malthusian, but we are enduring as much a war against our minds. It is a cognitive war that draws on military methods. It draws on military methods of control and commercial methods of addictive dependency. Education and work are dehumanized. They are reduced either to the mere maintenance of the existing order or to the acquisition of skills to serve it. Leisure time is dominated by screens, a world of addictions marked by the proliferation of violent content, first-person shooters, and bridal sexuality, algorithms enforcing a true mental apartheid, and games training you to make money through betting like a trader without any creative work. Artificial intelligence is not a threat that would replace humans, as some idiots say, including the dominant billionaires around Trump. It is limited to processing existing data, but it can lower us to its level by keeping us at the stage of logical perception without expressing creative capacity and by doing everything necessary to give us hooked. We must therefore remain clear-headed in order to face these challenges. However, the mere clarity of mind can lead to cynicism or to an escape into helplessness. We may thus succumb to morbid delights, the pleasure and fascination we might feel by merely analyzing what is going wrong and wallowing in pessimism. We must be immune to the systems exhibited by those around us in order to resist them. St. Augustine, in his City of God and Confessions, shows us that taking pleasure in the suffering of others or simply examining it while taking satisfaction in the accuracy of one's analysis is a corruption of the heart and contradicts charity. Lyndon LaRouche demonstrated that any psychological analysis must, on the contrary, be an active analysis of the creative act, a psychology of the human capacity for discovery, expressed through political engagement to inspire one's fellow man and improve our society. From the outset, LaRouche opposed the cybernetic conception of Norbert Wiener. From the onset, Lyndon LaRouche opposed the conception of Norbert Wiener and John von Neumann, for whom the transmission of information was reduced to a transmitter, a receiver, and a feedback, a logical relationship regardless of the actual substance of the message. Today, artificial intelligence, which I like to know Aristotelian intelligence, covers, based on the existing data it feeds on, everything that is already known. It is like cybernetics, even if on a logical, incomparable scale, in a higher scale now. But it's like cybernetics, incapable of truly creating anything because it traverses the realm of the known. Sam Altman, the cynical creator of OpenAI, has himself stated that people's mistake is to treat it as a creature when it is merely an excellent assistant. LaRouche addresses the nature of the creative act in his preface to the Science of the Human Mind, dating from 1983. There is a growing number, I quote, there is a growing number of humans who have the will and the right to know. This method, which is that of Plato, St. Augustine, Cardinal Nicholas of Cusa, and others, has two interrelated facets. In one aspect, it can be described as a scientific method, a method of creative discovery. Yet, mere knowledge of the formalities of the method is not enough. There is an emotional facet to the method, an indispensable emotional facet. Without the driving energy supplied by the latter, the former is inert knowledge. To present the two faces as one is to describe a scientific psychology, a science of the human mind. It were perhaps the most effective choice to present the method as such, a scientific psychology. In the realm of politics, Charles de Gaulle emphasizes that there can be no truly scientific decision, no truly scientific decision-making without the support of the right emotion. Let us finally listen to Friedrich Schiller as he tells us, soar with a bold wing about the course of your time. Let the future century already begin to dawn in your mirrors. There, a magnificent humanity makes itself capable of elevating the present, for the path of its reason then passes through the heart. Provided we make us fit to make it happen, que nous puissions de dire, patriots and world citizens, soon freed from the nuclear blackmail, vive la France libre. Es lebe das freie Deutschland, and welcome to the United States recovering the revolutionary identity of 1776. Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Ja, vielen Dank, Jacques. Besonders die letzten zwei Sätze, die
Thank you very
gesagt
much,
hat.
Jacques,
Thank you,
especially
Jacques,
the last two
especially
sentences
for the
that he said.
last
Ich möchte jetzt
sentences
zum,
that you said.
den nächsten Redner bitten,
I would
nach
like
vorne
the
zu kommen.
next speaker
Und
to
zwar
come
ist es,
up to the
Herr
podium,
Jürgen Schöttle.
which
Er
is
ist aus Frankfurt.
Mr.
Herr Schöttle ist
Jürgen
Ingenieur
Schöttle.
und er
He
wird
is
zu
an
dem Thema
engineer.
sprechen,
And will
wirtschaftliche
speak
Energieversorgung und
about
Souveränität sind untrennbar.
economic
Herr Schöttle
sovereignty
hat
and
selber 40 Jahre lang
secure
im
energy
internationalen Kraftwerksbau in der
supply is
Kraftwerkstechnik gearbeitet und hat
cannot
dann
be separated
anschließend
from each other.
sich an einer Schule im Bereich Physikunterricht noch engagiert, was natürlich besonders wichtig ist in den heutigen Zeiten. Und ich glaube, er wird uns eine ganze Menge Interessantes zu sagen haben. Herr Schöttle, können Sie? Ja, Sie sind schon auf dem Weg. Gut.
Mr. Schöttle.
Das sollte doch gar nicht sein, mein normaler Passwort. Was zum Prinzen haben? Ja.
Ja, meine Damen und Herren, ich freue mich ganz besonders, dass ich hier vor so einem Publikum reden darf, weil Energie interessiert an für sich sehr wenige, leider.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to talk here
Das wird
because
jetzt ein Feuerwerk
usually
von Zahlen werden.
people
Und
don't
ich hoffe, ich überfordere Sie da nicht.
appreciate energy as a topic too much.
Will ich das einschalten?
Ich nicht hier. Das ist doch gar nicht aufs Programm.
Das Sonntagprogramm. Sonntagprogramm, guck mal. Oder schick mir das. Haben wir Schöttle irgendwo? Findest du es online?
Schöttle hier, ja, die Nummer natürlich. Die müsstest du auch haben.
So, ja, Entschuldigung, es tut mir leid. Ja, ich komme jetzt zu meinen Papieren.
Now I'm coming to my papers.
Der Weltenergiebedarf wird immer größer.
The
Derzeit beträgt der Primärenergieverbrauch 130
energy needs of the world are getting more and more bigger. Wenn es denn schickst
Der
mir.
Trend wird durch den Bevölkerungszuwachs
The-
und durch die
the trend
Industrialisierung ständig steigen.
To will increase ever more. Together, coal, oil, and gas are covering 68% of the prime energy needs. Even though the new renewable energies are still dependent on fossil energies. This also is for Germany. In Germany, we need 3,000 terawatt hours per year, but we are only 6% better than the world energy supply. But it's very expensive, which I will detail later. As we see here, and we see that only 212 terawatt hours per year of electricity through wind and sun. And these only produce 10% of final energy consumption. That shows you where we are right now. Only 10%. We need to produce 10 times of that if we want to come to where we want to. Until 2024, that has not been a lot. Currently, solar and wind power plants are installed in Germany that generate 212 terawatt hours per year of electricity. On sunny and windy days, production far exceeds demand of approximately 75 gigawatt hours per hour, leading to regular shutdowns of solar and wind power plants and resulting in negative electricity prices on the exchange. In the last 3 weeks, we only had negative electricity prices. The 1st of May has cost many millions of euros. And by 2045, solar and wind power plants are set to be expanded fourfold, potentially generating 1,000 terawatt hours per year of electricity. That's only half of what we need. Electricity consumption in 2045 is projected to exceed 100 gigawatt hours per hour during daily peak hours. On sunny and windy days, however, generation is expected to exceed 200 gigawatt hours, a level far higher than necessary. This electricity surplus can only be addressed with energy storage solutions. But electricity cannot be stored. It can only be transformed in maybe in chemical storages. Current storage capacity relying on pumped storage and battery systems is barely sufficient to cover power outage lasting just a few minutes. Storing the excess electricity is technically possible. I'm an engineer, I know, but extremely expensive and unaffordable. Now you can see this, the numbers. Each year, we spend 84 billion euros each year in coal and gas. And according to this graphic, until 20, approximately 1,000 terawatt hour per year is to be generated from renewables in 2045, with the remaining 1,000 terawatt hours per year to be covered by hydrogen imports, with an expected hydrogen price of 8 to 12 euros per kilogram. This amounts to import cost of approximately $300 billion euros per year, meaning our sovereignty is steadily diminishing and we are becoming increasingly dependent. Until now, energy supply required imports of only 84 billion euros per year.
4 bis 6 sind es immer noch 150 Milliarden, immer doppelt so viel, wie wir heute machen.
And
hier haben wir die durchschnittlichen Kosten aufgetragen von Strom.
Here is the average cost of renewable energy is approximately 12.4 cents per kilowatt hours. New solar and wind plants are around 7 cents per kilowatt hours, but they are volatile. That means it's not constant. The pure electricity generation costs of coal-fired power plants and nuclear power plants with an annual utilization of over 6,000 hours are 4 to 6 cents per kilowatt hour and provide reliable baseload power. To compare volatile plants with baseload reliable power plants, system costs must be added, like the grid and the storage. System costs include necessary short-term storage such as batteries, along with backup power plants and grid expansion. These costs will increase the electricity generation price of solar and wind plants by a factor of 8 compared to baseload power plants. German energy policy, the phase-out of nuclear energy, is characterized by constantly rising electricity generation costs. Grid fees and ever-increasing subsidies. Feed-in tariffs for renewable energies are financed by taxes at approximately 18 billion euros per year. Redispatch costs amount to $3 billion euros per year and are steadily rising. The average household electricity price is 40 cents per kilowatt hour. With the tax-funded feed-in tariffs, it would be just under 50 cents per kilowatt hour today, which is already nearly the highest in the world. Here in Europe, we have a low, we don't produce a low amount of carbon gases, but a lot. Now we look at how it would be compared to others. The slide shows the expected electricity generation costs, excluding grid costs. With current taxes and surcharges and without subsidies, a household electricity price of just under €1 per kilowatt hour is to be expected in the future. This is the result of a misguided green energy policy, which is also supported by a large portion of the population influenced by decades of political and media advocacy, such as Germany must save the climate. We are only 1% of the world population. Or wind and sun don't send a bill. But the brown coal also does not send a bill. That's such a nonsense. They really make us dumb. Next point. Nuclear energy is the devil's work. Like Carsten Schneider of Baden-Württemberg said, nuclear energy is very, very important. I wrote to him, but he didn't even answer. In Germany and France, we have had nuclear energy over 40 years without one death. Last year, people died, 12 people died when they tried to install solar energy. They rolled from their roofs. And next point, how they make us stupid, there is no final storage site for radioactive waste. In Finland, they do it. So that means we just don't want it. All this is nonsense. In an industrialized country with little sun and wind, such as Germany, an energy transition is only possible with a mix of renewable energy and new technologies like nuclear energy and fusion. The energy transition has cost us 700 billion euros so far. The future investment cost for solar and wind power plants, including battery storage and backup power plants, amount to approximately 5,000 billion euros. Some studies estimate the total to be double that amount, which would be 10,000 billion euros. So that's the whole household of Germany. The Federal Audit Office is correct in its repeated assertion when it warns, quote, security of supply is at risk, electricity is expensive, and the federal government cannot comprehensively assess the energy transition's impact on the landscape, nature, and the environment. And the ecological aspect is even worse. Friedrich Merz, on 16th of January this year, he said that nuclear exit is a strategic error. It has cost us billions of euros. and we should go back to nuclear energy. He said, if Germany would have stayed at nuclear energy, we would have not have had to pay 600 billion euros. So we already know it, but we just don't do it. Deindustrialization and a decline in prosperity are already clearly evident today and will continue inexorably. The German energy transition is not financially viable. It will fail. It already has failed. In summary, we only have made laws, but no energy policy. And then new laws are being made, and so on. In summary, it must be noted that with the energy transition, Germany is no longer a competitive business location and is losing significant sovereignty. All solar systems, like large portions of wind turbines and batteries, are imported. And completely. Future, we need 10 times more material for solar and wind power as compared to conservative energy production.
Man hat ja eingesehen, man kann nur halb ausbauen, also auf 1000 Terawattstunden. Der deutsche Weg ist kein Vorbild für die Welt.
The German approach is not a model for the world. Given the high material consumption of volatile energy sources, the path to a global energy transition is completely ruled out.
Dann kann man mit den vorhandenen Netzen noch ganz gut was machen. Das kostet nur Geld.
And we can, if we reach more than 30% of renewable energy, it's become really expensive because we need just a completely new infrastructure like backup power plants. So what should we do? I'm only an engineer. We should right now stop renewable energies. We should go back to nuclear, like Austria. Austria is doing gas turbines. We need to build new nuclear 3. Nuclear power plants of the generation 3. And we should also progress to generation 4. Fracked LNG gas is producing much more CO2 than brown coal, but this doesn't count in Germany. We don't talk about it. Import dependency, energy costs, security of supply, deindustrialization and loss of prosperity will be our future challenges. An energy transition without a mix of new, innovative technologies such as advanced reactors and fusion plants will fail. Now I show a short film where I wanna make fun.
Meine Damen und Herren, das ist deutsche.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is German energy politics.
Ich bedanke mich ganz herzlich für die Aufmerksamkeit.
Thank you very much for your attention. Oder, warte mal, vielleicht mache ich noch ein bisschen. Warte mal.
Da drängt sich ja gerade
ich mach noch.
eine Explosion auf.
So,
die auch
we have to also talk about another explosion after the last film that you showed.
Vielen Dank, Herr Schöttle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schöttle. We are coming to the next contribution.
Möchte ich jetzt Herrn Patrick Baab hier
I want to ask Patrick Baab.
Er ist Journalist und Autor. Ein
Christine?
streitbarer Journalist und Autor, würde ich sagen, obwohl er
He's-
sehr ruhig ist.
he's
Es hat's in sich.
He's a really good
Er
author.
schreibt zu dem Thema Staatsstreich in Permanenz, die Zensurindustrie und das Verwertungsmodell des
And his topic is-
Kapitalismus.
What is the topic? Jetzt macht Alexander, was macht denn Christine jetzt?
Meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, zunächst herzlichen Dank für die Einladung und ich grüße meinen Freund Ralph Bosshard in Abwesenheit, der aber mit zuhört und wünsche ihm gute Genesung. Bertrand Lassalle hat einmal geschrieben, Verfassungsfragen sind Machtfragen. Wer also von einem Staatsstreich spricht, der stellt sich in der Regel einen Coup d'État gegen die Verfassung vor. Was wir heute aber erleben, ist ein Staatsstreich innerhalb der Verfassungsnorm. Die staatsrechtliche Hülle bleibt erhalten, wird aber entkernt. Der Ausnahmezustand und damit eine neue Form der autoritären Staatsführung geht mit einer Art Demokratiesimulation einher. Die Suspendierung des Rechtsstaats findet innerhalb der Verfassung statt, die zu einem Kokon reduziert ist, aus dem eine neue Diktatur schlüpft. Ein Beispiel dafür sind die extralegalen Sanktionen gegen Einzelpersonen. Sie werden aller Rechte beraubt, nicht durch Bruch oder Aufhebung des Rechtsstaats, sondern unter Umgehung rechtsstaatlicher Verfahren, die formal erhalten, aber zugleich durch eine Form der Willkürherrschaft ersetzt werden. Es handelt sich also um die Einführung einer Diktatur auf Samtpfoten, deren Krallen für die Mehrheit unsichtbar bleiben, aber umso wirksamer sind. Der Ausnahmezustand wandelt sich, so hat es Giorgio Agamben geschrieben, in eine ständige Praxis des Regierens. Der Begriff Staatsstreich in Permanenz stammt von François Mitterrand. Er war gemünzt auf de Gaulles Verfassung der 5. Republik und gewinnt in meinen Augen neue Aktualität. Mitterrand kritisiert die zentralistische und autoritäre Machtfülle des Präsidenten und beschreibt, wie aus einem Initialen ein permanenter Staatsstreich wird. Die Wiedereinführung der nationalsozialistischen Zippenhaft im Fall Hüseyin Dolu, seiner Frau und seiner Mutter wurden die Konten gesperrt, zeigt, dass es sich hier um offenen Staatsterrorismus handelt, gerichtet gegen Dissidenten, die sich beispielsweise in Deutschland am Friedensgebot des Grundgesetzes orientieren. Dies scheint mir also durch den Begriff Staatsstreich in Permanenz sinnvoll beschrieben. Politische Verfolgung, Propaganda und Zensur gehen Hand in
Political
Hand.
persecution,
Zusammen bilden sie ein
propaganda, and censorship
Herrschaftsinstrument
go
zur
hand in
Durchsetzung
hand.
von wirtschaftlichen
Together, they
Interessen,
form an
politischer
instrument of
Macht und
domination for the
kultureller Hegemonie.
enforcement of economic interests, political
Initiiert
power,
wurde die
and cultural
Repressionsorgie
hegemony.
gegen Kriegs- und
The orgy
Regierungsgegner
of
von der
repression
NATO.
against opponents of
Bei ihrem Gipfel in
war and the
Vilnius
government was
2023
initiated by
kündigten
NATO.
die Regierungen der
At their
Mitgliedstaaten
summit in
an, bei der
Vilnius in
Bekämpfung sogenannter
2023, the governments of the
Desinformation
member states
verstärkt
announced
mit
that
der
they would
EU
cooperate more
zusammenzuarbeiten.
closely with the
Dies deutet
EU
darauf hin, dass
in
die NATO bei der
combating so-called
Bekämpfung abweichender
disinformation.
Meinungen im Hintergrund
This
die
suggests
Fäden
that NATO
zieht.
is pulling the
Die
strings
EU
behind the
schwenkte
scenes
mit
in the
ihrer
fight
im
against
Juni
dissenting opinions.
2024 verkündeten
With its
strategischen
strategic
Agenda
agenda
2024 bis
2024-29,
2029
announced in June
auf
24, the
Kriegstüchtigkeitskurs
EU
ein.
shifted
Darin
course
verspricht der
toward a
EU-Rat,
war
die
readiness
Widerstandsfähigkeit
stance.
der EU im Rahmen
In it, the
eines
EU
alle
Council
Gefahren und die
promises
gesamte
to
Gesellschaft
strengthen the
umfassenden
resilience of the EU
Ansatzes
within the
zu
framework
stärken.
of a comprehensive approach
Die
covering
EU
all
wertet dabei
threats
alles,
and
was
the
sie
whole of
als
society.
Desinformation ansieht, als
By doing so, the EU
Destabilisierungsversuch und
classifies
stellt dies
everything
in
it
eine
considers
Reihe mit
disinformation as
Terrorismus
an
und
attempt at
gewalttätigem
destabilization
Extremismus.
and places it in the same
Damit
category as
wirken die
terrorism
ideologischen
and violent
Apparate zusammen wie
extremism.
kommunizierende Röhren.
Thus, the
Es sind alle
ideological
Apparate, welche die geistige Reproduktion
apparatuses
der Gesellschaft organisieren. Die
function
Aufgabe
together like
ideologischer
communicating
Apparate ist
vessels.
es, die
These are all the
Loyalität zur
apparatuses that
marktwirtschaftlichen
organize the
Ordnung und zur
intellectual
staatlich
reproduction
verordneten
of
Politik
society.
sicherzustellen.
According
Zu diesen
to
ideologischen
the
Apparaten
French
zählen Schulen, Universitäten,
philosopher Louis
Akademien,
Althusser, the task of
staatlich oder
ideological
unternehmerisch finanzierte
apparatuses is to ensure
Denkfabriken,
loyalty to the
staats-
market
oder
economy and to
supranational
state
finanzierte sogenannte
mandated policies.
Nichtregierungsorganisationen, Stiftungen,
These
transatlantische
ideological
Organisationen,
apparatuses
Vereine,
include
Verbände und
schools,
Parteien,
universities, academies,
öffentlich-rechtliche
state or
und
corporate funded think
Konzernmedien,
tanks, state or
sogenannte
supernationally
Faktenchecker, die
funded
eigentlich nicht Fakten,
so-called
sondern die
non-governmental
Kompatibilität
organizations,
mit
foundations, transatlantic organizations,
Propagandanarrativen checken,
among them
Kirchen,
fact checkers who actually do not check
Internetpublikationen wie
facts but rather
Wikipedia,
compatibility
die
with
eigentlich die
propaganda
Fälscherwerkstatt der
negatives.
Geheimdienste und Regierungen
You have
sind.
churches, publications such
Ziel
as
des
Wikipedia, which is
Zusammenwirkens
the forgery
ideologischer und
workshop of
repressiver
intelligence agencies
Staatsapparate
and
ist es nun,
governments. The goal of the collaboration between ideological and repressive state apparatuses is to subject anyone who deviates from the propaganda and war cause of NATO governments to reprisals. At the same time, they serve the purpose of instilling fear by setting an example and enforcing preemptive obedience among the population. However, this installation of fear did not begin with the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2024. It began in 2020 with COVID-19 and the state of emergency. With the pretext of infection control, democratic procedures and individual fundamental rights were suspended by decree, thereby undermining the Constitution. The mobilization of fear was intended to paralyze citizens' resistance. The ruling oligarchy used the outbreak of the respiratory disease as an opportunity to declare a global state of emergency. The censorship industry is spreading into all areas of society because it could rely on two social pillars. One of these social pillars acts as a transmission belt for NATO and the US, namely transatlantically corrupted academic elites. The second social pillar is the academic precariat. Especially in times of capitalist crises, the lack of critical thinking among intellectuals must be emphasized. Their function, particularly during upheavals in the exploitation model and in the face of legitimacy crises, is to organize the social hegemony of a group and its state rule, especially during those moments of command and leadership crisis, in which spontaneous consensus is in crisis. On the background is the endemic crisis of capitalism. By this, I mean first and foremost the growing weakness in investment that has built up over the past decades and that stems from the problem of overaccumulation. There is, so to speak, too much capital. Overaccumulation means that capital owners can no longer find long-term investment opportunities to achieve the desired returns. Now, in the neoliberalism of the 1980s, it brought about the internationalization and global deregulation of the financial system. The financial markets were the place where one could still make quick money and face falling profit rates in industry. As early as 2016, the volume of transactions on the financial markets exceeded turnover in the goods and services sector by more than 100-fold. Through the creation of derivatives, that is, derived and bundled securities, stock market bets can be placed on price fluctuations. Financial capitalism emerged because profit rates in the real economy had fallen, and now it itself became the cause of crisis. The 2008 financial crisis triggered the most severe global recession since World War II, and shortly thereafter led to the euro crisis, which remains unresolved to this day. Since the financial markets had largely collapsed, central banks opened the floodgates and flooded the system with funds. The financial crisis marks a turning point at which two decisive structural changes in the financial system began. A shift from bad loans to government bonds and from banks to the shadow banking system. According to the BIS in Basel, the bailout of banks with taxpayer money has led to a reduction in risks within the banking sector, while at the same time the debt burden of nations has risen to levels never before seen in peacetime. At the same time, fund assets have migrated off bank balance sheets, while they have risen dramatically among hedge funds, investment funds, pension funds, insurance companies, and financial investors. This increases risks, as investments in the shadow banking system are often leveraged using derivative mechanisms to optimally exploit price fluctuations. Now, the transition transition to digital capitalism, which is now rising from the smoldering ruins of neoliberalism, in quotes, is bringing about radical changes in the financial markets and the manufacturing sector. In the financial markets, trading is accelerating through the use of artificial intelligence, thereby increasing risks. Blockchain technology is giving rise to new trading and speculation platforms that have so far eluded government control. However, this does not lead to the demise of capitalism, but rather to the radicalization of its fundamental mechanisms. It accelerates the concentration of capital and the emergence of social inequality. In a digitized real economy, value creation and the circulation of goods are also undergoing radical changes. Proprietary markets now take center stage with leading companies such as Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon, all of them monopolies. Traditional monopoly firms operate in markets, says Philip Baab, whereas the leading media of digital capitalism are markets. The market itself is being privatized. This is a fundamental difference from the neoliberal ideology, which centers on neutral markets. The dominant markets are privately owned. What matters most to them is reach, that is the size of their user base. To generate reach, offerings from other business areas are cross-subsidized. Consumers are lured with ostensibly free offers which they pay for behind the scenes by handing over their data. If a product costs nothing, then the user is the product. Unlike classical monopolies, the power of the market owner, and thus their profit model, manifests itself in four forms of control. First, in information, the central raw material. Second, in access control at their own discretion. Third, in the selection of services. Fourth, in price control, specifically directed at producers and consumers. Now that neoliberalism has already largely liberalized and precarized employment relationships, new risks and intensified workloads are emerging. In manufacturing and sales, digitalization is being used for rationalization and job cuts. So while the data and profit cascades flow upward toward the platforms, the risk cascades flow primarily downwards. Added to this is massive job loss triggered by the use of artificial intelligence. According to the report Mercer Global Talent Trends 2026 by the consulting firm Mercer, 63% of the executives surveyed see AI as an opportunity to automate workflows and increase returns. On the consumer side, the internet and social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, enable a quick, immediate response. This makes it easier for emotion to take precedence over a thorough examination and weighing of issues. Reason-driven reaction and processing take a back seat to speed and emotionalization. Well, Dieter Nahr observed a long-time behavioral shift years ago. It consists in a decline of the individual's innate mechanisms for reflection and processing. Stimuli and expectations generate responses without the individual being able to process them, make a choice, or resist. This prognosis takes on particular significance in the transition from neoliberalism to digital capitalism. For, as Wolfgang Engler has pointed out, in all societies upended by neoliberalism, mass anger prevails. It is directed against the power elites who have increasingly put wage earners under pressure through social cuts, privatization, liberalization, and a shift of responsibility for life's risks from the state to individuals. If this anger remains long suppressed in the daily struggle for survival, the emotionalization and manipulation of emotions on social media become an outlet for discharge of impulses. For the monetization of resentment to function at all, It must stimulate an emotional demand among the audience. Both producers and consumers benefit superficially, the former through click counts, the latter through the release of pent-up emotions. In this way, a new media exploitation model has emerged. It is no longer primarily information-based, but rather resentment-driven. At its core, then, this is about monetizing resentment, or in short, hate production as a business model. This monetization of resentment occurs primarily through proprietary platforms. Services like Twitter, where the formation of public opinion takes place almost exclusively among the chatting classes, drive this process. The brevity of these platforms forces the intensification and compression of emotional arousing curves. This is entirely in the interest of the power elites who know that the anger they trigger must under no circumstances be directed against themselves. That is why they use propaganda to shift aggression toward internal enemies, such as alleged conspiracy theorists, right-wingers, or corporate designers, or external opponents such as the Russians or Putin. The political economy of resentment favors the mobilization of fear and the politics of exclusion. All in all, we're currently experiencing a multi-crisis, a multiple sclerosis of the capitalist system, a crisis of overaccumulation in finance, a crisis of the nation state, an educational crisis, social crisis, democracy crisis, and a crisis of legitimacy. According to Andrei Korsav, capitalism is an expansive system that spreads out, thereby externalizing the crisis and exploiting it. To counteract the falling rate of profit, capital appropriates peripheral zones of raw material extraction and cheap labor. With the collapse of the socialist bloc, however, these non-capitalist peripheral zones disappeared. Today, capitalism encompasses the entire club, thus there are no further opportunities for expansion. Therefore, the valorization of capital is intensifying through the exploitation of four areas. First, capital is launching an attack on human health. Second, an attack on human reproduction. Andrei Korsav counts population reduction among the elites and for projects. Third, the attack on the human brain. We are currently witnessing a process of derationalization and the destruction of reason. The destruction of the education system is advancing. The high number of children and adolescents with a migrant background in Europe makes it impossible under current conditions to maintain the level of knowledge. We're experiencing a crisis of transmission, which has to do with the encroachment of audiovisual media to everyday life.
In unserer Kultur ist die Schrift nur noch eine mediale Ausdrucksform unter anderen, nicht mehr die
In our culture, writing is now just one form of media expression among others, no longer the form of expression by which society is guided. For a certain way of thinking and representation, however, writing cannot be circumvented. This means that at the present day, where visual media have become the dominant media in the Western Hemisphere, truth is rising to the surface, while the written word appears obsolete. We are experiencing a process of deliteracy, but the visual surface is easily manipulable, if not technically reproducible, through the means of digital technology and AI. The world of images is a post-factual world. The fourth realm is the blood and bone mill. The mechanism of capital's exploitation in which the drive for expansion and intensification coincide is war. For crisis-ridden financial capitalism in which the ratio of capital employed to profit deteriorates and the rate of profit thus falls, war is a form of bloody bankruptcy postponement. If wars await success successfully new resources and minerals such as oil, gas, rare earths, or black earth soils, as found in Ukraine, can be seized, along with new cheap labor, new markets, and key geostrategic positions. In any case, war is a money laundering machine in which money is flushed from the pockets of citizens into those of finance capital amid a flood of corpses. Essentially, capital is destroyed and primitive accumulation can begin anew. Ultimately, therefore, it's not about winning wars. From the perspective of capital, the point is for wars to continue because they are highly profitable. From the very beginning, the war in Ukraine was about driving the Russian competitor out of the energy market and generating new profits. And that was the case from the very beginning of the conflict. In this multiple crisis, a series of trends are emergent that are transforming capitalism as we know it and hollowing out nation-state and parliamentary structures. On the smoldering ruins of neoliberalism and behind the democratic facades of parliamentarism, a new form of elite rule is emerging, characterized by a radicalization of class division, the dismantling of democracy, and rampant irrationalism. I have identified the following 6 processes of transformation. 1. Deindustrialization and financialization. Capitalism in European countries and the United States has largely lost its core industrial base. Manufacturing operations have been relocated to Asia, primarily to China, and in the microelectronics sector also to Korea and Taiwan. The long-term decline in the rate of profit is driving anti-growth. Financial capitalism increases systemic growth as a driver of inequality. Secondly, we come to market deliberalization and digitalization. The central control mechanism of capitalism, the market, is shifting into private hands among the leading companies of digital capitalism. Digital capitalism is a driver of exploitation and is in conflict with democracy. No area today is as closely monitored and controlled as the Internet. In the words of Palantir founder Peter Thiel, I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible. Third, destatization and supranationalization. We are currently witnessing the sclerosis of democratic institutions and the party system. Real power is shifting to closed clubs and supernatural structures and so on, such as the WHO, the EU, NATO, Bilderberger meetings, US-controlled and funded think tanks like the National Endowment for Democracy, USAID, Brookings Grant, Heritage Foundation, the Atlantic Bridge, etc. Supranational organizations will play an increasingly significant role in the future. They are stripping the populations of nation-states of their remaining opportunities for participation and oversight and orchestrating the agenda of an extraterritorial elite. Fourth, de-democratization and autocratization. A new form of control regime is being tested through sanctions and censorship. These sanctions are a precursor to martial law and are apparently intended to accustom the population to a new regime of arbitrary rule, which can then be completed with the declaration of a state of emergency. In this way, transatlantic corrupted transnational elites seek to stabilize their power while simultaneously maintaining a facade of democracy. This is the permanent coup d'etat I mentioned, drawing on François Mitterrand. Fifth, derationalization and deliteracy. The dismantling of the education, digitalization, and NATO's cognitive warfare are contributing to the destruction of reason. The Enlightenment's claim to universality and its orientation toward rational discourse is being replaced by identitarian thinking which prioritizes the validity of one's own group and places this social unit above others, forming a bridge to racism and its specific manifestation of Russophobia. Through the use of AI, information gathering is confined to the mainstream. Unconventional thinking is weeded out and unwanted information is filtered out. AI thus serves not to unleash intelligence, but to enable administrative control of thought and behavior by the elites. 6. Destabilization, militarization, and a relapse into barbarism. The destruction of civil society and its involution through state-funded NGOs is accompanied by the restructuring of social institutions and organizations into transmission belts for the power elites. Together, they convey propaganda narratives designed to shift blame for aggression onto specific social groups or onto external enemies in the service of politics of division. With phrases such as the Russians have a different relationship to violence and death, or Russians are animals, pigs, and with the ban on Russian flags and insignia on commemorative days, Russophobia is once again made acceptable in everyday life and is capable of gaining majority support as a form of racism. The economy of effect and the implemented identitarian thinking are causing a civilizational regression into resentment-driven provincialism, base instincts, and a renaissance of barbarism. Thus, the war in Ukraine and the attack on Iran are two theaters of war in the West's final battle. We find ourselves in an interregnum between a unipolar and a multipolar world, between dying neoliberal capitalism and a new social order still in its birth pangs. First, everything depends on whether the forces striving for a multipolar world can win a conflict with the hegemon, the United States. At present, it does not appear that they can do so by peaceful means, nor is there any sign of greater democratization on the horizon. Second, it is crucial whether people in Western countries regain the capacity to act in self-determination to confront their bellicose and anti-democratic elites. This would require a popular front for peace and democracy and a dual strategy of parliamentary and extra-parliamentary initiatives. At present, however, it does not look that way. The majority of people in Germany seem exhausted and resigned by the permanent state of emergency and the multiple crises. I see no sign of an uprising. The Germans are dozing their way into ruins. In the tragedy of King Leo Spitzer has his character, the Earl of Gloucester, say, "Such is the course of times when fools lead the blind." And if we don't put up resistance to this, we will end up on the front. Thank you.
Ich habe noch gar nicht dran getrunken. Ist alles gut. Ja?
So, ja, das war ja eine ganze Menge. Wir atmen durch, wir lassen es sacken. Es ist sehr viel Inspirierendes und ich glaube, dass im Englischen heißt es ja Food for Thought, also Gedankenfutter.
We have to digest what was said right now, and we have a lot of food of thought.
Ich möchte jetzt
Now
Ossenkopp bitten, den
I
Beitrag
want to
von Herrn Bosshard,
ask
Oberstleutnant AD Ralph Bosshard,
Stephan to
vorzulesen.
read
Er
the
ist
contribution
leider
of
erkrankt,
Mr.
wie
Bosshard.
Patrick Baab ja schon sagte. Und er hat uns
As
aber einen kurzen Beitrag
as Mr.
geschickt.
Barkt already said, but he had sent us a
vielleicht noch für
short
diejenigen, die ihn nicht kennen,
presentation.
kennen ihn ja. Er war
He
ehemaliger
was
militärischer Berater des OSCE Generalsekretärs und ist
former advisor to the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, and Stephan has a word.
In den
And during the 6 years I worked for the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, in Vienna and in the conflict zones in Ukraine and the South Caucasus, I observed with growing concern that the opposing sides were exploiting virtually every aspect of government action and social life for the purpose of warfare. This did not stop at interventions in daily life, food that may or may not be consumed, music that one is no longer opposed to listen to, sporting events, and much more. Anyone who took the liberty here of deciding for themselves how deeply they wanted their private life to be interfered with was very quickly assigned to one or the other warring party. In NATO, these interventions are part of an official doctrine. You have all likely heard of the concept of cognitive warfare. Since February 2022, the intensity of cognitive warfare has escalated, and the most zealous perpetrators no longer shy away from criminal offensive. Lawyers call these defamation, slander, breach of official secrecy, and abuse of office. They believe they are protected by the prevailing political climate and therefore fear political opposition in general. Such opposition would strip them of that protection. This is a trend that will continue as long as statutes of limitations are still in effect. Another cause for concern is that the European Union is now also moving to extend its jurisdiction beyond its own borders. Political and economic sanctions against organizations and individuals, even though not legally justified, are being declared binding outside the EU as well. Foreign states and companies are being compelled to complement them. The US has been doing this for a long time. That this contradicts the principle of states' territorial responsibility and thus their sovereignty is hardly disputable. The achievements of 350 years of history are being lost. All of this has its origins in countries that are themselves in the midst of an identity crisis and not just a political one. Hateful comments directed to all those who speak of the Christian West are outward signs of this. As a result, Western European elites in particular are now beginning to offer us a negative definition of our own identity. We are supposed to be those who oppose others who are not considered as liberal, open, and democratic. The protagonists in this global struggle have the means to destroy the foundations of human life, even those countries that want nothing to do with any of this. But even if they do not make use of their nuclear arsenal, they have the ability to bring modern societies to a halt by destroying the necessary infrastructure. Their struggle can paralyze the global economy and thus the global South's prospects for development that would enable it to combat poverty. The global South in particular has a right to demand restraints from these protagonists. A correction of the fanatism we have just witnessed in Western Europe can only come from within. That is why the work of the Schiller Institute and the editorial staff of the Executive Intelligence Review is so important, and I thank you for that, Ralph Bosshard.
Ja, wir machen nun weiter mit einem
Okay, we continue now with a contribution from another area of the world. That is from Serbia. I am very happy that Mrs. Jasminka Simić is here from Belgrade. She is a journalist by Radio Television of Serbia in Belgrade, and she will say something about
zwischen den Staaten des globalen Südens aus serbischer Sicht. Jasminka, bitte.
Thank you, Dr. Elke. Good afternoon to all of you. Distinguished Dr. Helga Zeppler-Rusch, dear colleagues. It's my great honor to be today with you and participate to this relevant conference, which is of the great importance and holds the great responsibility in the moment of the turmoil in the world. And my presentation will tackle the three main points. First, the position of the Serbia in current geostrategic situation, and the second, the cooperation between Serbia and China and within South Group, and the third, the new quality of the relation and cooperation in digital era, and through the fourth revolution with China as a global power. And now I'll give a conclusion. Serbia, as a successor state of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, currently is a European Union candidate country, and European Union full membership is the main proclaimed foreign policy priority of our government, and thereby accepting the Western policy emanated in the market economy and democratic values. European Union is the largest foreign trade partner of Serbia, amounted 43.7 billion euros in 2025. Serbia harmonized its policies according to acquis communautaire, but on the level of the foreign policy, there is some gap due to refuse to impose sanctions against Russia. And close ties with Russia and China are in the focus of European criticism towards Serbia. Also, Serbia is a neutral country proclaimed in 2007 with a military neutral policy towards the military alliances, including NATO. And the former Yugoslavia was the founder country of non-aligned movement, and now Serbia has the status of observer in that movement, but still sticks the principles based on the non-aligned policy and the UN Charter. In the Yugoslav period, this policy represented the independent in conducted the policy based on the principles of active peaceful coexistence, and it was in a contrast to the imperialist and hegemonic foreign policy of other actors of international relations. At the same time, it meant the aspiration for some kind of democratization of international relations in all areas, especially in the policy and economy. Nowadays, it means the building a multipolar world and equal global order, which advocates China and the group of the countries within South-South cooperation, Belt and Road Initiative, including my country, Serbia. And most successful relation Serbia made with China in the last decade. And just to mention that the President of Serbia, Mr. Aleksandar Vučić, ended his state visit to China 2 days ago by signing more than 30 agreements between two countries, and new investments for Serbia amounted 953 million euros. And the main focus is on artificial intelligence and robotics. And the total foreign trade exchange between Serbia and China in 2025 amounted 8.2 billion euros. Just to compare, in 10 years ago, it was only about 1.3 billion of euros. And the main characteristic, the main results of this cooperation is a mutual political confidence which is in process of deepening. Just to mention that 19 countries supported establishment international mediation organization in order to keep international justice and global governance. Pragmatic cooperation which brings the rich outcome are the free trade zone agreement signed 2024, company Zijin Mining, Zijin Copper in Bor, in a city in Serbia on the eastern part, and also steel mill SSBS in Smederevo nearby Belgrade are the three biggest exporters in Serbia, and also the two countries are in the process of building the railway Belgrade, high-speed railway Belgrade-Budapest. Cultural and people-to-people cooperation are experiencing strong development, and the two countries mark 70 years of diplomatic relation and friendship last year, and about 184,000 of Chinese tourists visited Serbia last year. Serbia launched a national strategy, Serbia 2030, with new priorities, including new industries as artificial intelligence and robotics, advanced infrastructure in the transport and energy areas, and upgrading the living standards. China is ready to improve the connection of its 15 5-years plan and Serbia 2030 plan to explore the potential of cooperation in scientific and technological innovation, green economy, biomedicine, and artificial intelligence. But as the Latin proverb said, the new time requires new customs, and now we are approaching to the new quality of the relation and the new quality of productive forces, as the president of China, Xi Jinping, announced 2 years ago, meaning on innovation, foster emerging industry, and confirmed in the new 5 years economic plan, may be seen as a new quality and the second phase of the future cooperation between China and the other countries from the Belt and Road Initiative, Global South, and also the BRICS. Because mostly of those countries are developing countries with a complicated modern history, with the wars, with the clashes, with the territorial disputes, and they are in shortages of advanced technology and modern economy, sometimes shortages of idea for the further stage of development. And as the United States, China, and Canada, the leading country in the high technology innovation, especially in artificial intelligence, there is a great possibility for the countries cooperate with China. And many of them were inspired by the Chinese achievements, because artificial intelligence have great potential for socio-economic transformation, the countries of the South and their cultural renaissance. Almost all these countries grouping in the regional organization adopted its own artificial intelligence national strategy. In Latin America, in Asia, the Asian group, African Union, and just to mention that Serbia adopted the two national strategy on artificial intelligence, and also European Union 2 years ago adopted the Artificial Intelligence Act. And it will contribute, all of these countries with their national strategy will contribute to the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals 2030 and of United Nations, and specific program like African Union Agenda 2063. And what is also very important, and China started already 2019, is to to establishment and the appropriate artificial intelligence governance system and regulation at regional level and also at the national level, which respect the human rights and dignity for the all cultural in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, and just ensure the safety and security of artificial intelligence system across the continents and across the countries. And the greatest success was achieved by Nigeria from Africa and also from Chile in Latin America. Firstly, in preparing the famous chat books. A chat box is a virtual assistant that automatically answers citizens' question, and the US was on the first place with its ChatGPT. After that, the China issued DeepSeek, and inspired by China, Nigeria launched last year service-wise GPT for using in administration, in Nigerian administration. And after that, Chile announced a major step forward. It is LATAM GPT project dealing with the cultural, language, history of the region of Latin America, similar to ChatGPT and DeepSeek. But what is the challenges in this artificial intelligence cooperation? And many of the authors warn that Chinese new language model above mentioned, the DeepSeek, offers the region to Latin America, Africa, Asia, even in Europe, chance to seize artificial intelligence on its own terms, but also bring a risk of dependency. Developed by a team of Chinese researchers and hacked by state-linked institution, it is a part of Chinese to push to embed its AI infrastructure in developing nations, strengthen digital ties, and reshape global artificial intelligence government beyond Western influence. And while the USA, for example, pursues even more powerful models, the Chinese strategy involves artificial intelligence diplomacy, hoping to shape the future of digital sovereignty on its terms. And Serbia is on its own way in modernization in that sense, and Serbia will be the host of the specialized exposition Expo 2027, and many of the innovation of the fourth generation will be presented, including a fully autonomous vehicle, which will be showcased at the Expo 2027. And China and many of the big power like France and Germany and other countries confirmed their presence at the Expo 2027. And what is the more important, and many of the African and Asian countries within the group of South-South cooperation and Belt and Road Initiative also confirmed participation at Expo 2027 in Belgrade, including in Nigeria, the most populous country in Africa. I saw the colleagues from, in the morning, the colleagues from Africa. And I just to mention that we have already started to research about the future position of our country in the new era, and inspired by a seminar organized organized in China 2 years ago in Beijing, where I attended, and my colleague from Africa, from Asia, and from Europe. I wrote with my colleagues from Nigeria, Mr. Ako Chubioyo Abach, two research works about the scientific research about mutual cooperation within the Belt and Road Initiative and Global South Initiative about the new digital era, highlighted the artificial intelligence. And what is very also important by the Chinese side. During the two sessions held in March in Beijing this year, China outlined the new vision in the next 5 years, opening the wide possibility of cooperation with the world and facing with the new forms of unilateralism, protectionism, and hegemonism. China, as a permanent member of United Nations Security Council, strives to maintain the peace in the world and trying to establish the new type of relations with other countries and building the community of the common future for the humanity is the main trade foreign policy of China in the next 5 years. And the expansion of China has already shifted the balance of power in the direction to Asia, and there are more and more nations who believe that this country is the place to solve the current political and other global crises. We were witnesses of that during the visit of American President Trump and Russian President Putin to Beijing. And through the Belt and Road Initiative and also the cooperation through the South-South group, my opinion is that China is ready to share its latest achievements with all the countries of the initiative, including my countries. And to conclude and to give some recommendation, the South-South countries, earlier known as the Third World, gathered in the non-aligned movement, are not developing countries anymore. Maybe by economic facts, but they are an anchor for world progress and better living standard for more political equality in the multilateral world without colonialization and neocolonialism, for right to think freely and to respect the other. But the main question is in the future is how China can help to all partners and countries to share the Chinese achievements of the Fourth Revolution, at the same time preserve the main principles of the Charter of the United Nations. And I had some suggestions and recommendations how to do it, and I worked out it with my colleague from Africa. On the first place is engagement and inclusivity on the level of civil society, business, and academia, more intense mutual academic cooperation, mutual support in securing raw materials needed for the new high technology projects, a creation of a transnational legal order which is under the process, and also encourage Chinese company to create a local job, exchange the experience in the policy of eradication poverty with the Chinese expert on the spot, foster people-to-people policy, and launch at the end one common journal with common topics in order to better inform academics and experts as well as the public. And in that sense, I would like to use this opportunity to be today with you, to thank to Dr. Helga Zeppel-Rusch once again for the initiative to create a movement of world citizens, which the world needs more than ever, and I'm ready to contribute in the scope of my possibility. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jasminka. And now we come to our last presentation, and that is by video live. I hope it works out now, of Dr. Professor Theodore Postol from United States. Many of you know him already. He's a retired professor for science, technology, and national security. Now I started to speak English. I'm sorry. Also ich wollte das Ganze eigentlich auf Deutsch sagen, aber ich war jetzt so im Englischen befangen. Wir fangen jetzt gleich an und ich freue mich sehr, dass Sie da sind und hoffentlich auch verfolgen konnten, was diskutiert wurde.
I hope that you could follow a bit what was discussed. So, Dr. Postol, we're happy to hear you.
Which will then be followed by a discussion of all the participants of this panel, including you. Thank you.
I lost the connection. Am I on now, or you can hear me? Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to start out by pointing out that I am uniquely unqualified for this kind of discussion. I am trained as a scientist and engineer, and I must say I have learned in the last few years quite a bit about the politics of the current world situation. And strangely enough, I will make some comments on the related to the question of sovereignty that are an amalgam of observations that are both from a science and technical background, and also political in their character, social and political. I was impressed by Mr. Cheminade's description of the I guess the criminal capitalism that has been practiced by the West. I must say, although I would not have described it this way, I must say his description carries essentially a very clear message of truth. So I think that's important for us to all keep in mind. Lieutenant Colonel Bosshard's comments about the European Union and its influence on the general political activity and direction of Europe also struck me as highly accurate and of quite great importance. We're talking here about sovereignty. I understand the European Union was supposed to play an integrating role in the European policy, but I must say it has produced a very large amount of incoherent and counterproductive policies which it has tried to impose on nation states. In particular, the statement of Dr. Bittner about the energy situation in Germany was technically very comprehensive and extremely important and worthy of a great deal of attention. Where I have some comments to make about Dr. Bittner's presentation. I have some comments that are not meant to be critical, but meant to be complementary to what Dr. Bittner has talked about, and that is the highly political character of decision-making, not only in Germany, but in Europe in general, where the role of technology and science has been minimized to a point that it is hard to recognize how the policy relates to actual circumstances that need to be considered in the decision making. For instance, as brought up by Dr. Bittner, there is a large amount of concern about the effects of carbon dioxide on the global climate, which is basically the question of greenhouse gases. Now, if one were to review the scientific literature, and when I'm talking about scientific literature, I'm talking about hundreds of refereed scientific articles about the character of climate change and how it has manifested itself over not only thousands of years, but hundreds of thousands of years and millions of years, we would come up with an explanation that certainly includes carbon dioxide, but would also include other very important effects that are simply not discussed and not considered at this time. So let me be specific. For example, we know that the distance between the Earth and the Sun changes over a 2,000-year period by about 600,000 kilometers. Incidentally, this is not the only orbital change that's important, but I'm actually referring to the short times of thousands of years in what we call the current Holocene, which is about 11,000 years of a warm period. Prior to the Holocene, we had an ice age. So only 11,000 years ago, the Earth suddenly warmed up. And during this interval, we have seen an oscillation in the temperature, higher and lower, due to a 2,000-year cycle where the Earth is slightly closer to the Sun and slightly more distant. Right now, we are in a period of warming. That period of warming should continue to the year of 2600, when the Earth will be closer to the Sun than it is now, and then it will start to move away from being closer to the Sun. The distance will increase, and the Earth will become somewhat cooler. There is no carbon dioxide catastrophe in this role here. Again, carbon dioxide plays a role, but it is not, all of the scientific evidence does not indicate a carbon dioxide catastrophe. We are seeing changes in the global temperature. We need to recognize that and understand it, but it is not simply due to a carbon dioxide catastrophe. We are also seeing changes in the global climate due to the sunspot activity on the Sun. Now, you might say this is a very abstract set of issues I'm bringing up, but if we assume that all of these temperature changes are from carbon dioxide, and we distort our policy with regard to energy planning and climate change planning to only focus on carbon dioxide, when there are these other phenomena that are in fact as important or more important than the carbon dioxide, we are screwing up our energy planning and our energy policy, just as criticized by Dr. Bittner. So I'm not here to make a long argument about these phenomena. this is more appropriately done in a different forum. But what I am pointing out is there is a lack of regard and attention to fundamental science that is leading to policy making that focuses on a single phenomenon, which is real, but not necessarily as dominant as other phenomena which we know scientifically are important. And by doing this, we screw up our national planning with regard to energy planning for the future. Now, in particular, the politics of this extends to economics as well. So, for example, the EU, the European Union, is trying very hard to stop Germany from reopening the Nord Stream pipeline with Russia. Now, the argument focuses on people who are making this argument that it shouldn't happen are focused almost exclusively on the fact that Russia could benefit from the commercial relationship with Germany by its selling of by Russia's selling of natural gas to Germany. What is completely absent in this debate, if you want to dignify this discussion as a debate, is the fact that Germany benefits enormously from this influx of the availability of this natural gas. And the idea that Germany is actually doing more damage to itself than it is commercially doing to Russia is completely absent in this discussion. There is no analysis of the fact that a commercial relationship with Russia benefits Russia, but also Western Europe. And now I say Western Europe because the German economy is in desperate trouble right now and getting severely damaged, deindustrialization on a big level, and that is having an effect on the economies of France and Britain and the rest of Western Europe. And all of this is based on ideology and dominated by ignoring both the facts of economics, science, and engineering. And Dr. Bittner's discussion is very important because it talks about the engineering and science, but it's not the only piece of it. This is not a criticism of Dr. Bittner. This is simply a comment on the wide-ranging problems of sovereignty that are being undermined by the current behavior of the European Union and its domination of decision-making, taking away sovereign decisions that are sound for the countries of Europe. So I am not in a position to discuss this intelligently, but it seems to me that this is a giant problem that Europe must deal with. Now, the final point I'll make, which is much less broad, all these points are much less broad than the earlier discussions. Again, I do not claim to be an expert, is that we are now moving into a period where the danger of escalation to a wider war beyond the already extraordinarily damaging Ukrainian war is the problem that the NATO is expanding the war against Russia by allowing NATO countries to become co-belligerents against Russia in this Ukrainian war. So, for example, the Balkan states are now allowing their airspace to be used for drone attacks against Russia. Russia has made it very clear that they will not continue tolerating this situation. And NATO and the European Union and the Western European countries need to recognize that they are now co-belligerents in this Ukrainian war. And once you become a co-belligerent, you raise the question for Russia about whether or not they should strike back against the co-belligerents who are involved in attacking Russia. Russia has made it very clear that they have tried to limit the possibility of this war expanding out of control, potentially resulting to an escalation to nuclear weapons and global destruction. This has been very clearly stated by the Russians repeatedly. Instead of taking this discussion seriously, the NATO powers have instead chosen to interpret Russia's warnings, because they have not been followed up by retaliation against the NATO states, as empty threats, rather than recognizing that this is a warning that really must be taken seriously. These states have instead ignored serious threats of escalation that Russia is now making. And I am very concerned that if the NATO states continue to ignore these warnings, what will happen is that Russia is going to take the steps it feels it needs to take to show NATO that it has been serious and that NATO is completely misunderstanding what the Russians have been saying quite freely and openly. And we are going to see, I am afraid, strikes into NATO powers, probably first into the Baltic states, but I can't say how it will happen. And this will pose a grave threat of general escalation of this Ukrainian war into a general global war. And this is something that should not be allowed. The NATO states, as individual powers and as members of NATO, need to wake up and understand that they are provoking a highly dangerous possibility of escalation by simply ignoring the Russian stated concerns. And I'll just stop here because I think the message should be very clear at this point, at least the one I'm trying to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Postol. Vielen Dank. I would now like to move to the
Dr. Postol. I would like now to move to the discussion, and I hope you can stay on.
Very good. So, also bitte kommen Sie dann, also die Sprecher des zweiten Panels.
Bitte die Redner des Panels, die hier im Saal sind, auf die Bühne zu kommen. Wir machen das so wie beim ersten Panel. Wenn Sie sich da mal...
Und dann sehen wir mal weiter.
If you want to take a seat here.
Ja, okay, dann gut. Tja, das wird ja jetzt irgendwie eine interessante Sache. Wie machen wir das denn?
So we are figuring out what we do and how we do it. Please be a little bit patient.
I need, thank you. I need my earrings.
So, jetzt.
Christine ist gar nicht mehr dabei, oder?
Nö.
1, 2, 3.
Hallo? Ja, jetzt geht's so.
So now it's working.
Also, Sie haben ja alle hier
You have all endured very well here this marathon, which we have done in the second round of this panel about different subjects, and I would like to now begin to ask some certain aspects what the speakers spoke about, which was multifaceted, and then we will go into the discussion. I hope that Mr. Postol can hear us and can also join the debate. I want to remind you that the panel has the topic sovereignty and consensus of the governed. I think that we now know a bit better what it's about when we talk about sovereignty, and foremost what we talk about when and how we can win back the sovereignty of our nations to advance the common good in the sense of a new just economic architecture and also a new development and security architecture, as Helge is proposing it. And I would like to begin with a question to Jacques, who has spoken at first about how to avoid that humanity will die out. Jacques, if we think about France, we also think about the French Revolution. And it is so that in Germany we say a lot that French people are at least active, they are going on the streets and demonstrate. We should take an example from that. So what is that about? Where does this impulse come from to actually have more resistance, which is stronger in France than in Germany? Is there a positive tradition, or is there more behind it, to it? Such as, how can we transform the anger of the population in something positive? Could you maybe tell us something about that, how you view it as a long-year politician in France and also a world citizen?
No, the translation is very bad. So it is in one word.
You didn't hear the translation?
Can you hear me?
His microphone doesn't work.
Das liegt nicht an uns.
No.
Ich verstehe.
Technical difficulties.
Well,
I think I did a good job in translating.
this is not a classroom. So
That's not
it's not the French having sovereignty and the Germans having none. It's not really. Reality is much worse, in a sense, and hopeful at the same time. In France, this sense of sovereignty is very simple, why it exists. It's because in 1966, General de Gaulle decided to leave the integrated command of NATO, and we have no foreign soldiers on French territory. So we are in principle occupied. In reality, we aren't, because there were historically all kinds of agreements between France, the United States, and above nations, private interests, to make American-type ideology to enter France. In 1946, there was an agreement between the Americans and the French, Bloom Barnes, allowing all Hollywood movies coming to France without paying taxes. This was a counterpart to the Marshall Plan, so-called help of France. So you have this fight between the capacity to understand what really sovereignty means and other people that have a concept of sovereignty that they don't see as a whole, which goes from the way you speak, the way you behave, and the way you lead a foreign policy. So part of these French sovereignists feel or believe that sovereignty is to be against the others and to be protected by a sort of Maginot Line. We all know what happened to the Maginot Line. And then this type of evolution in France is, I try to favor it, this spark of sovereignty, I try to favor it with principles. If it's not based on principles, there is no sovereignty. And the first principle is peace, and to secure to the peace against the destruction of humanity. And for that, you need to be free. Your hands have to be free. So it means a cause where we got a lot of calls about that, and to sign declarations to dissolve NATO, dissolve the European Union, and end up with the euro. So if we don't do that, but you can't do that, if you can't do that, you are not sovereign. But you can't do that with a snap of the fingers. You have to do that in depth. And I think what our Serbian friend said is exactly the road to follow. It's to integrate this European history, or this European cause, inside the development with the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and what comes from the global majority. And this is the only chance to be really sovereign, is to ally with all sovereign nations, and with this conjunction of sovereignties, then it's, I would say, sometimes the coincidence of the opposites, because the sense of sovereignties are not the same, but the word sovereignty rises above the contradictions between the different elements. So I think that the technologies of the future, and thermonuclear fusion, for example, associated to artificial intelligence, this is the base for sovereignty. Then, what the Pope said also, and what he raised, the issue of peace, but peace against those that abuse of it. So sovereignty can only be gained against this development in the world of this techno-military financial fascism, this new fascism that it's raised, which is not anything else than a form of the British imperial tradition. So I think in Germany, to go back to Germany, you know a lot about this British imperial tradition, and I think that in the population there is this willingness to get free of it for once and for all. So sharing these two things, what I said about France, what I said of Germany, it's only the association of sovereignties beginning by the French and the German ones, who can free us. There is nothing like one or the other. It's together, and it's together with the nations of the Global South. Already today, we see a lot of people in France, I don't know what happened in Germany from that standpoint, a lot of people in France are blaming Germany to be the one that managed to, let's say, destroy the French nuclear program. But what I told these people, yes, but they destroyed also the gas production programs in association with Russia, which destroyed the German industry. So we know we have to associate this sense of future in our culture and found the basis in our culture for this association, together with the most advanced technologies and the situation of the world today. So in that sense, we are one in the same boat, and there is one humanity and one Europe.
Yes, thank you. I would like to ask Jasminka, because you also may want to respond to this comment by Jacques and also to speak on this future orientation, the question of basically world movement, movement of world citizens. But maybe you can also share a little bit with us about what you told me about your experience when you came together with African researchers some time ago. What is the difference between the spirit from Europe and from these colleagues from Africa? Maybe you could say a little bit about that also.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Fimmen, for your question. Yes, when Mr. Cheminade was speaking about sovereignty in France and Germany, I really would like to add something concerning, firstly, the sovereignty concerning the Serbia and concerning, in effect, the Kosovo. We are trying to keep our territorial integrity and sovereignty concerning the Autonomous Republic of Kosovo, and we are trying our best. You know that almost all the Western countries recognize unilaterally proclaimed independence of Kosovo in 2008, except 5 countries of European Union. But what I would like to stress when we speak about the sovereignty, all type of sovereignty, not only in a classical means and for all countries, is that there are some in a theory of international relations. There is a group and direction which names functionalism, and especially developed in the Great Britain, that argued the sovereignty is not to be seen in a classical view, but to see the sovereignty is not if you transfer some kind of sovereignty to the other countries, but in a domain of economy, especially. I think that it was inspired by the European Economic Community at that time, but the sovereignty is the main principles of United Nations, and I think that with the territorial integrity should be respected all over the world. And I think that the African countries had experience with its sovereignty, and my experience with a group of African colleagues from the African countries is, as you, Dr. Fimmen, mentioned, was my stay in China. It was we were 25 from 8 countries, and what I could see there and realize that really the people from Africa made really a commendable progress in all areas. I think that they are far away from the period of colonization, even neo-colonization. A very modern country. I emphasized and mentioned Nigeria, and the spirit of those people, and are very, very modern, and they are completely, very quickly entered into fourth revolution, which based on artificial intelligence, and they are more, let's say, skillful than we in Europe. Their, let's say, behavior, their way of thinking is completely different, and I think that we will talk about it tomorrow in the panel, in the panels. It's the right time to not to celebrate, but to mark the end of the colonization and all things like slavery and that period which happened in Africa, partially in Latin America. And I think when we are speaking about the sovereignty, I think that is the most important to not to be for the new technological revolution to keep on sovereignty in let's say in terms of statehood, but sovereignty now there is more and more like in a cyber era and cyber ambience, cyberspace, also in artificial intelligence. There are no borders, and that sovereignty must be seen in other way, maybe modern way, in order to be together. New technology, I think, is the way to gather us all in the world together in the best possible manner. But what will be at the end, we cannot see. But my really impression is that the world should go ahead and just to prevail all the problems which are on the international scene now, and just to see and have some moment in some theory, and just to theory of the international relation, just to mention them and just update them. Thank you.
Ja, wir haben eigentlich eine paradoxe Situation. Sie haben darüber gesprochen, der Kolonialismus hat ein Ende gefunden. Wir sind gerade dabei, uns wieder zu kolonialisieren zu lassen, von dem, was wir von Patrick Baab gehört haben. Also wirklich eine neue Herrschaft über das Denken, über die Gehirne, die Leute also klein zu halten. Und
this what we heard from Patrick Baab about the methods to impose cognitive warfare on the minds of the Europeans. Perhaps you can say something more on what is the situation and what can we do about it, especially. You have this anger and rage. What's the method to get out of that? And to get on a new level where this kind of warfare cannot work.
Nun, zunächst bin ich an diesem Punkt äußerst pessimistisch, wenn es darum geht.
I'm quite pessimistic about this question of regaining our sovereignty. I would like to raise some points about that. We have lost the hegemony about the public space, and we have lost control over the political process, and both have become other directed and have turned against the people. In the beginning we had at this time there are many people in favor of war, which are those who will not go to the front. In the digital world, the offerings are being co-financed by PR monies. So these are not neutral information. The algorithms who decide find the offer you will not look for the 1 millionth offer on the Google list. You will look among the first 3 or 5 or 10. So we have these at the same time compression of the opinion space. The important information you will not find into the net, except if you know exactly what you're looking for, then it's different. But if you look at reportings of war reports, if the situation looks always totally different if you're right at the front. When I was in Afghanistan, I was infected with diarrhea, and if you don't get help within 2 days, you will die. But people in Afghanistan know that about 1/3 of the Europeans who go there get this kind of diarrhea, and kind of confirm what Jacques said. The cultural warfare is geared toward limiting your thinking. It's geared toward blocking your thinking through emotional content. Who is going into the academic world? This is the upper classes, because for the less wealthy people, academic life is not affordable. I have a colleague in Hamburg who has a father who was a director of a saving and loan bank. So he just bought her flat for 180,000 marks. For people in that class, it's no problem. So these people who go to the academia, they have a chance to inherit the wealth of their parents. And that's the people who are in favor of the war. They don't say this openly. They say we have to help the poor Ukrainians. So they leave out all the prehistory. I have discussed with Gabi Gysi at the Humboldt University. They learn how to gender, but they don't learn how through academic methods. We don't have to talk about the media. We have the 3 I's: incompetence, ignorance, and ideology. And all these factors come together. And that means it's extremely difficult to open up this blocked conflict. And then the power elites have succeeded in turn all the public institutions from representative of interest into instruments of power. So, for example, a group of pensioners of a trade union they wanted to invite me. So the state board of the trade union called them and said, we won't give money and we won't give you room.
Dann ruft der Bundesbibliothekarverband an und sagt, lad den wieder aus.
I get an invitation to a library, and then the Federal Organization of Libraries calls the local library and tells them, don't do it.
Persönlich an. Wenn ihr den nicht ausladet, schicke ich euch meine Hörer
in other cases,
zum Mittagessen. Also ihr müsst euch das wirklich auf dem dümmsten Niveau vorstellen.
So this is really on the lowest level. And this is how the whole society is infected. And as long as the academic people, they're part of the precariat, as long as this is a situation, they will do anything to keep an extension of their academic contracts. So so in the peace-oriented events, we see mostly pensioners, because those who still work, they can't afford to do it. I have one colleague from the in the North German TV station. They have to meet me in the back rooms because they can't be seen publicly without losing their jobs. So we have lost the dominance of the political process. The institutions are being directed by the corrupted transatlantic elites. So we have to organize outside of the parliaments. We have to organize protests to bring them onto the streets. It would not work like the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht trying to be in opposition by joining the parties who in government who are in favor of war. So what should we do? Like the people after the war, you have to do away with the rubble and rebuild. We have to regain the public realm. We need to have a cultural dominance. I'm a pensioner, I can talk as I want. A person who is still living from a wage can't do that. And I would like to quote Patrick Lawrence from the US, everyone must decide where he can resist, and then he must do it. The opportunities are different. I can do more, others can do less. But if you're still employed in some work, you can still throw a lot of sand into the machine.
Also das fordert ja geradezu dazu heraus,
so this is calling for us to become creative, to activate the potential to do something better. Because you don't surrender. You don't do that. And this conference is a forum to inspire people, and especially to Helga said this earlier today. The International Peace Coalition is a very good opportunity for people to join in. Fridays at 17 o'clock, you can just listen, or you can join the discussion, but you don't need to say things if you don't want. So I would like to question a question for Ted Postol. Is he still on?
I'm here.
Oh, hello. Great.
Yes.
So, ja, also ich jetzt eben gerne noch auf
like
den Punkt, bevor wir in allgemeinere Diskussion kommen, würde ich den Faden aufnehmen, den
pick
er
up
ja
one question
gemacht hat schon in seinen Kommentaren
at one
zu
point
dem,
that
was
he
Herr
made in his
Schöttle
commentary to
gesagt hat
what
in seinem Vortrag
Dr.
eben über
Schöttle said in his
über die
presentation
Energie und die
about the
Notwendigkeit
energy and
einer
the
souveränen
necessity
Energiepolitik,
of a
dass das eben
sovereign energy
zusammengehört
policy,
zur Souveränität,
that this is part
dass
of
Souveränität noch
sovereignty,
kein Wort ist,
that
sondern auch eine reale
sovereignty
physische
is not
Grundlage
a
haben muss.
word, it must
Und
have a
da würde ich als
physical
allererstes gerne Herrn
basis.
Schöttle
And
nochmal selber das Wort
I
geben.
would
Und
like
es wurde schon
to
viel über das gesagt, was er gesagt hat.
give the word back to Dr. Schöttle because there was a lot of comments about
Diskussion,
what
die wir
he
jetzt in der
said.
Zwischenzeit gehabt
So
haben.
on the
Was
background
sind
of
denn
what
Ihre
was discussed
neuen
since,
Erkenntnisse oder Ihre
what is your
Gedanken
new
darüber, das
no
so einfügt zu dem, wozu Sie referiert haben?
what adds to what you have
Ja, da kann
said?
ich was zu sagen, ja.
Oh, I
Also,
can say something
mit
to
Herrn
that.
Dr. Bittner habe ich ja kurz auch gesprochen,
I've talked to
wo er
Dr.
gesagt
Bittner,
hat, wir
where he said
brauchen einen Aufbruch.
we need
Und den Aufbruch
einen
brauchen wir nicht nur bei
Aufbruch.
den Themen, die eben hier diskutiert werden. Den Aufbruch brauchen wir auch in technischen Themen.
We need not only in question of
Neigung gegen,
peace
ich
and
sag mal,
war, but
Kernenergie
also
oder
in
neuen
terms of
Technologien,
science and
kommt
technology.
durch 30
The
Jahre
rejection of modern technology
Probleme
and
mit den Medien.
nuclear
Wir
power
hämmern
and so
ihnen
on.
ein.
The
Kernenergie
effect of
des
30 years of
Teufelszeugs.
indoctrination by the mass
Und wenn
media.
wir
They
an
tell
dieser
them
Ecke
nuclear
nicht eine andere
power is
Aufklärung bekommen.
from the devil.
Und ich
And
habe
if we
den Herrn
don't,
Dr. Bittner gefragt, was ist denn Aufklärung? Praktisch.
so we have to
Das ist
educate them. But
Fehlden.
what
Meine
do we
ganzen
do?
Vorträge enden alle damit.
We have to
Wir
educate
brauchen mehr
people.
Bildung und Forschung.
We need more
Insbesondere auch Forschung,
education
keine
and more
Kunststoffe.
research.
Und ich bin ja angekündigt worden, ich habe ja mehrere Jahre ehrenamtlich Physik an der Schule gemacht. Wie es an den Schulen
I was a
meine Damen und Herren,
volunteer
wissen Sie nicht.
physics
Ein 14-Jähriger
teacher.
beherrscht noch nicht mal einen Dreisatz.
A 14-year-old kid doesn't know the
Und wenn Sie gucken in den Medien, es
mathematical
gibt überhaupt keine technischen
division,
Dinge, die dort
similar things.
erklärt werden. Ich
There are
muss
many
Ihnen sagen,
things
ich war
that
ja
are
bei einer sehr
not
großen
being
Firma und wir haben
explained
einen
at all.
Riesenfehler gemacht in den
We had
90er
a
Jahren.
company in the
Wir haben dort
90s.
diskutiert,
We made a
dass die
huge
Großindustrien
mistake.
wie Siemens, BASF,
We
Audi
discussed
und wie die
that
alle heißen, einen
the big
Fernsehkanal
business
machen, einen
like
eigenen, einen
Siemens
Industriekanal,
and others
den wir
should
nutzen,
have their own
unsere Technologie mitzugeben,
TV
so
station
wie RTL, Spielfilm und so
to
weiter. Das haben wir
produce
versäumt.
media
Das ist die Frage, was heißt Aufbruch?
content,
Und
and that was not
Aufbruch ist
done.
für mich 30 Jahre
So
brauchen
we
wir,
have to
um die Bildung dorthin zu ziehen,
we have
wo wir sie
to
brauchen.
we need 30 years to bring
Ich
the
sag's Ihnen, Sie
education
können sich
up to the
nicht
standard
vorstellen,
that
auf
we
welchem
need, to the
Niveau
level that we need.
heute
You
Bildung
cannot
läuft und das betrifft die Schulen, wie
believe
sie ausgestaltet sind. Ja,
at
und
what
betrifft
level
auch
education
die
is
Großteil der Lehrer,
nowadays.
grün, links, rot, nicht alle.
Many,
Das
many
ist unser Problem. Und
teachers
das
are
ist der Aufbruch, den wir
leftists
brauchen.
or ecologists, and they
Wissen Sie,
just
und
indoctrinate.
Kernenergie oder neue Technologien, das ist alles erstmal neu, mit allen Risiken.
So nuclear power and similar things. That's
Kernenergie
all.
kam
This is new.
1960 etwa, ja, mit
In 1960,
Versuchsanlagen
about the
der
nuclear power
Kraftwerke.
developed.
Die ersten
There were
Kraftwerke G2, die hatten eine Sicherheit
the
gegen
first
Austreten von
the first
radioaktiven Stoffen
power
von
plants,
5 mal
nuclear
10
power
minus
plants
4. Also
had
alle
a security level
5000 Jahre ein
of
schwerer Unfall.
that every 5,000 years you would
Und wir
expect
hatten dann
a
solche
major
Unfälle. 3 Mile Island
accident.
zum
We
Beispiel.
had
Und die
3
haben
Mile
dazu
Island.
geführt, dass wir
But
alle
these,
Anlagen nachgerüstet haben auf einen höheren
and
Standard.
then we uplifted the
Gucken Sie
standard to
mal,
a
wir
much,
hatten
much higher
1970
technical
20.000
standard.
Verkehrstote
We had
in
in
Westdeutschland
transportation, we had
mit langsamen
20,000
Autos.
people
Wir
killed
haben die Autos
in the traffic
weiterentwickelt,
by
mit
cars.
Anschnallgurten, mit
Now we
Airbags,
have
mit Straßen, mit
developed the
Flensburg.
cars
Und
with
heute haben wir bei 83 Millionen Menschen mit viel schnelleren
belts
Autos, wir haben
and similar
53
things.
Millionen Fahrzeuge,
We
haben wir
have
noch
53
2800
million
tödliche Unfälle.
cars now in
Das muss
Germany, but only
entwickelt werden. Und wenn wir die
2,800
Entwicklung nicht wollen, dann machen
deadly
sie andere.
accidents.
Ja.
That's
So.
development, and
Und
if
die
we
neuen
don't do that
Anlagen,
development, others will do it.
Generation 3 Plus Anlagen, wie sie heute
So
laufen,
the
die haben heute
Generation
Sicherheit,
3
die
Plus
ist
nuclear
3 Zehnerpotenzen höher. Die
installations,
haben
they are
2 mal 10
3
hoch minus 7. Ja.
three potencies higher, 1,000 times more secure, because you have a very, very high level of security. Obviously, you cannot totally exclude accidents, but
ja, da sind wir natürlich auch wieder
we
bei
are
der
making
Frage,
progress.
da würde ich Herrn
So we're back to the question, and I would like to ask Dr. Postol to say something about this. People were scared as an active verb. They were terrorized about nuclear power, and if people don't have a basic knowledge about this, then they can be easily scared. But if you look at what an acute threat of a potential nuclear war, then that is perhaps an occasion to make people aware that there is a fundamental difference between a nuclear power plant and a nuclear bomb, which we have to get a handle through diplomacy, through negotiations, through de-escalation. And Ted Postol said in the end of his speech that we're really at a very, very dangerous point, and that the escalation that is progressing at this time has to be stopped. So I would like to say something to this aspect, because he is a real expert about this unfortunate, a very real theme of nuclear war. Can you say something about this?
Well, I think the problem of nuclear war right now is really due to the it's always there, because as Dr. Bittner pointed out, there's always the possibility of accidents, and you can never have a system that's totally free of that kind of problem. And we all need to think about the possibility that there will be nuclear accidents. My own view, having worked on nuclear weapons issues through a large part of my career, is that the overwhelming likelihood of nuclear weapons being used will come from some kind of mistake, some kind of accident. An accident can be a misunderstanding that causes a decision that is not based on a correct understanding of what is actually happening. And the danger of escalation is driven by the fact that these weapons are so powerful that the reaction on the other side could come very fast and uncontrolled, without thought, because the danger of more strikes would drive the military and political decision makers on the other side to take an action to hope, from their perspective, to hopefully reduce the consequences of follow-on strikes. And both sides are concerned about the follow-on strikes, and they start using nuclear weapons, and within a very short interval of time, it can escalate completely out of control. We had a situation in 1983. It was an exercise, fortunately not an actual situation, but the exercise was done. It was called Able Archer in 1983. It involved the political leadership at the highest levels of the American government in a NATO exercise. And what was postulated as part of this exercise was around 10 or 11 small nuclear, there's no such thing as a small nuclear weapon, but Hiroshima-sized nuclear weapons were used by East Germany against West Germany. And within 4 days, this escalated into thousands of nuclear weapons being used by both sides within 4 days, 96 hours. And by the 5th day, it escalated into a global nuclear war, and that ended the war game. They stopped it. But the driving factor was that each side was concerned that the other side was going to use more of its weapons, and each side struck the other side at locations where they believed nuclear weapons were available for launch, and this induced the other side to escalate in response. This was not controlled. This was not thought out. This had nothing to do with political decisions that were made in a reasoned way. It was just driven by the fear that the other side was in the process of escalating, and so each side escalated in anticipation of the escalation of the other side. And it just blew up into a global nuclear exchange nearly instantly. And this is the danger we face today. What if the Russians attack, let's say, some installations in the Baltic states? The Baltic states are involved in providing material military help to the Ukrainian government. So, from a purely the logic of war, it's perfectly appropriate for the Russians to attack the installations that are manufacturing materials and supporting Ukraine's attacks on Russia. That can, given the current environment in Europe, where the political system denies that it's at war with Russia, even though the political system is at war with Russia in a big way. I mean, NATO is at war with Russia in a big way, but the denial, the delusion that it's not, would likely result in the political system deciding that it had been attacked unprovoked. That's the argument, unprovoked. I mean, you have people like Kaya Kallas. She just the other day made a statement about the Russian retaliation against Kiev as being a retaliation aimed at killing large numbers of people. What we know is this massive attack involving 900 ballistic missiles, 90 ballistic missiles, 600 drones, killed 4 people. That's an attack that was obviously concentrated on military systems. Only a couple of days before, 21 young children, children, were killed in Luhansk by a Ukrainian drone attack against a teacher's school, a teacher's college. Now, Kallas was comparing the two in terms of the deaths. The facts don't support these outrageous claims. The problem is that one side responds to the other, and if there's a delusional belief on the part of NATO that they are not involved in a war with Russia and that they are not materially aiding Ukraine, when the Russians respond following the laws of war, you get attacked by somebody, you have the right to attack them in return. The European political leadership is going to start screaming that there was an unprovoked attack. This is the kind of delusion that leads to uncontrolled escalation. This is a real problem. So I don't know how I can emphasize this strongly enough. The Russian invasion of Ukraine was not unprovoked. I'm not saying it was justified. There are good arguments that that the Russians should not have done it, but the claim that it was unprovoked is outrageous. I mean, in 1962, the United States had a missile crisis with Russia. We call it the Cuban Missile Crisis. Everybody who knows a small amount of history knows how that came about. Now, if I were President Kennedy, and I'm not a person who, I'm very reserved about using military force. I'm against it. I think diplomacy is far more useful a tool. But if Nikita Khrushchev had told me that Russian nuclear weapons in Cuba was none of our business, none of the U.S. business, I would have invaded with the U.S. Marines, which is what Kennedy was planning to do. Fortunately, Khrushchev realized that he had made a mistake, and he worked with Kennedy to avoid a confrontation, a military confrontation. Now, how is Putin supposed to? Forget about Putin. Putin is the boy that everyone beats on. Sergei Lavrov is told by Antony Blinken that if Ukraine joins NATO, the United States reserves the right to put nuclear weapons into Ukraine, and it's none of Russia's business. Well, why would anybody say that it was crazy for Russia to decide to invade Ukraine to stop this this escalation by the United States and NATO? I mean, Cuba is twice the distance from Washington that Ukraine is from Moscow. Nuclear weapons from Ukraine, launched from Ukraine, would have very short timelines. And the question that any Russian political leader would ask, why would you put nuclear weapons in Ukraine? Don't you have nuclear strike capabilities from the United States? Don't you have a long-range nuclear deterrent? Why do you want to compress the decision-making time for Russian political leadership? Do you think that by striking first in a very short warning attack, you can decapitate us and possibly win a nuclear war? Why are you doing this? There's like no reasoning at all shown by the political leaders in Europe, or for that matter in the United States. There is no reason to put nuclear weapons within minutes of Moscow's political leadership. All you are doing is making it more likely that an accident will occur. And, the unreasonableness of European and American behavior is never discussed in these discussions about the right to join NATO. I mean, what right does any country have to threaten another with nuclear weapons? So we do have a very bad situation right now, and I think NATO has to cease and desist. And the idea that Russia invaded Ukraine to take over Ukraine is historically untrue. The Russians negotiated a treaty in Istanbul, which would have caused the Russian forces to withdraw from all of the essential areas that they quickly occupied, except for Crimea. And Crimea, incidentally, did not belong to Ukraine before 2014. Crimea was independent of Ukraine from 1991 to 1995. This is a fact of history. In 1995, the Kiev government went into Crimea and took it over, and incorporated it into Ukraine. This nonsense that Ukraine was, that Crimea was part of Ukraine from the beginning is a fiction. It's historically untrue. Now, I'm not here to argue in favor of what the Russians did or what the Russians did not do, but even the most basic historical facts are not recognized and acknowledged by the Western European powers in this outrageous war that did not have to occur. And the big loser in this has been Ukraine, but the biggest loser could well be Western Europe, as well as the world, if this thing is allowed to escalate, which looks like is more and more of a danger. So I have to say, I'm very disturbed by all of the Western powers, the behavior of all of the Western powers in this situation. Russia has to be recognized as a state that has a right to its own security. You don't have to like the Russians or like the Russian domestic state, the domestic situation in Russia. Leave them alone. You want them to leave you alone? Leave them alone. And you'll have a much better situation with much less danger to the security of the whole world. I don't know what else to say at this point, except I will say something to Mr. Baab. I agree with him completely about academics. These people are completely out of touch. They have no idea what they're talking about, and they have no academic standards. Because if you had academic standards, you would be talking about the history of this terrible Ukrainian crisis. And the academics I see, particularly the American political scientists, are completely illiterate. They do not do not learn if you tell them that Crimea was an independent state in 1991, not part of Ukraine, they would not know that fact. But we do have some political scientists who are very good. We have John Mearsheimer, for example, University of Chicago, who has been attacked relentlessly and who has really predicted everything that's happened with regard to the Ukrainian situation descending into war. So it's not universal, but I do agree that the academic community is largely out of touch with even the scholarly basic history that they claim to have expertise in. It's really outrageous, and university administrations allow this. They attack people who ask questions, which are good questions based on historical understanding of what has happened, and they ignore the outrageous false claims of people who claim to be scholars, but under serious academic scrutiny could not stand a review. It's just that simple. I'll stop for the moment.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and we are very glad that there are such voices of reason and clarity in the United States, because apart from Europe, we need them there very, very much. And so we will hear tomorrow more on the fight in the United States.
There are scholars in Europe who understand the situation well.
Everybody who looks at the map, there has to be a fundamental change in the United States, and that is one of the preconditions so that we can actually win this fight for humanity. Now, we have about 25 minutes for discussion, and I would like to ask some people, there are like 6 hands behind, yes, but maybe can I first ask some of the people who are behind all raising their hands. I think this gentleman there was the first one to raise his hand, but please be short. I know it's not easy. Bitte machen Sie es kurz, es ist nicht einfach. Damit jetzt alle noch zu Wort kommen. Und ich möchte darauf hinweisen, dass natürlich die Redner auch weiterhin hier sind und Sie auch persönlich die Gelegenheit haben, mit Ihnen anschließend zu sprechen, wenn nicht alles beantwortet werden sollte. Dankeschön. Ja, hier geht es.
Maybe try with another.
Hallo. Ah ja, wunderbar. Hallo. Ja, mein Name ist Emeritus, ich bin aus Braunschweig. Ich habe zwei Bemerkungen oder zwei Aspekte. Ich wollte zwei Sachen was sagen. Einmal zu Herrn Schöttle.
Mr. Schöttle and Mr. Baab.
Zu Herrn Schöttle wollte ich sagen,
To Mr. Schöttle, I want to say I have a completely different opinion like him. He said his facts are opinion made, but I've also studied it for 50 years. There's several things I want to ask about. The batteries are getting much cheaper. The electricity is getting cheaper. These are comments. These are. I just wanted to state that, and so that I'm opposing his opinion. So that coal is inexpensive, and you really have to pay for it. So this is an absurd argument. The other point, Mr. Baab, I thought his presentation was very good. I'm fascinated by him. But I want to ask him, he talked about the consequences of capitalism, but he didn't say anything about the alternative of China. I just want to ask him to say his opinion about that. Because I think China has the advantage that it really doesn't have the market as an aim, but the state, and this is a big advantage of China. Does the yuan take over the role of the dollar? That would be a very nice thing. And I would like to add up the offer from Mr. Bauer, where he said that there's a win-win situation for the whole world, as also Helga stated that. This is a good opportunity for the whole world if you take up the offers from the BRICS states. This would be excellent. So all the war situation is completely unnecessary. We have to completely change our economic system. That was my contribution.
Moment, ich muss mal gerade sortieren.
So I just want to look around. Do you want to say something? Please also cut yourself short. I'm Jürgen Knorr. I'm from Dresden, and been so over more than 60 years. I'm active in nuclear energy. First, I was concentrated on technical issues. Since over 30 years or more than 30 years, I was happy to learn to meet Mrs. Sepp-LaRouche, and since then my interest has a good orientation and has an international orientation. I'm very thankful for that. Therefore, I have visited several conferences, and Mr. Cheminade, I want to comply with you, which the policy of Germany, which has a disadvantage for France. At the time when we worked on the common pressure reactor, I was the leader of the nuclear society, and I thought there was a tremendous optimism that Germany and France will go together in this very future-oriented area. But this is over, and I'm really very sad about that. To Mr. Schöttle, I think your comments were absolutely good. All the young people, and as a teacher, you have expressed a certain pessimism. I don't agree with that. In Dresden, we have an education reactor, and we have combinations to 25 gymnasiums, high schools, where these students start a reactor. And they say, yeah, we can do that. This only works when different people in Dresden and in Saxony would support these projects, and that they made the permission that 16-year-olds can start the reactor. That needs to be praised, because that is against the mainstream of politics. And finally, if I am allowed to say something else, here in Berlin, where the Iran was discovered, the chain reaction was discovered, and the destruction of uran. We all know that the main argument against nuclear energy is a lot of questions with nuclear energies. I have submitted to Mr. LaRouche a press release, and where we state that the final storage of nuclear materials is finally solved. Everybody who wants to know more about that can ask me. Okay, we proceed like that. 3 persons have been addressed. Patrick Baab, who can talk about the China issue, and Jacques, and I will ask you also to be short about that, so that we also can add some more questions. And at the very end, we'll have also Helga Zepp-LaRouche will also have a word on that, because the question is, how can we combine all the elements for the solution, for the future productive orientation with which we can come out of this crisis? And she will say something at the end.
Ja, gerne. Also ich möchte dem netten jungen Mann mit der roten Jacke recht geben. Wir haben im April
agree with the young man with the red jacket. In April, we had solar electricity prices of 3.1 cent. But the price has nothing to do with the costs. With put in subvention of 100 billion euros, it is not paid by the state, it's paid by the citizens.
Das sind EPR-Reaktoren in England, die eine Bauzeit haben, so lang wie der Berliner Flughafen und wie der Stuttgart 21.
Who need twice as much time to build a nuclear power plant as the Berlin airport. If we take this as measurement, we can bury ourselves. This is, we have the electricity price from the stock market has nothing to do with reality.
Das sind die Ergebnisse des Börsenstompreises.
The result of the stock market electricity price is creating costs that you are paying that don't reflect in what is paid on the stock market.
Die Freisetzung der Marktkräfte in China
So
hat zu einem erheblichen
liberation of market forces in China.
So, gut, also ich fange nochmal an. In China hat die Freisetzung der Marktkräfte unter Führung der Partei zu einem
liberalization of the market forces in China has contributed to a huge step ahead. There are more than 300 million Chinese have been brought out of poverty, depending on how you define poverty. And many areas west of the Gobi Desert have been included into the transportation grid, which is only possible with huge investments. And so, so this was a success, but we don't know what will happen when the market, when there's an amount of saturation and when the liberalization of market forces is subverting the market, the Communist Party, which is already triggering some cleaning out of corruption. Professor Zhang Wei said we have to move the resources from the financial markets into production. And I agree with that. That is especially in regards to the countries in the global south, countries that still have development capacities, who can invest in housing, but if you go to the Usuri, what does it mean to create inclusive development? And sometimes you have on the Chinese side you have 5 million people, and you have on the other side you have 2 villages. And then the Chinese investors come in and buy up areas of territory, and that is overall a country like China will not be able to develop peacefully if the United States and their vessels have a strategy of creating chaos in order to prevent the global south and China from coming up. That is blocking of trade routes, blocking of energy sources. And of course, the United States try to create rebel groups along the routes of the Belt and Road Initiative, like in Myanmar. So I cannot estimate how this process is going to play out. And it depends a lot of, I don't know if the BRICS can create this process peacefully, and I'm pessimistic about that.
Only a small thing about China. I was visiting the Museum of the Communist Party in Beijing, and at the end they asked me, how do you see it? How you understand what you saw? And I said, it's a long march, but for you it's only the beginning. And they said, right, we are thinking about the next 500, 100 years ahead. And I think that's the advantage of China. They think in terms of the becoming and not in the being merely at a specific moment of their history. And I think we should be inspired by the thinking ahead together and have this sense that there is collective unity of the peoples of this planet to think in the same way.
Ja, würdest du? Oder? Also es tut mir leid, jetzt geht es nicht mehr weitere Fragen, denn wir müssen jetzt zum Ende kommen. Ich möchte nochmal darauf hinweisen, die Redner sind hier. Sie können jederzeit persönliche Diskussionen führen, auch morgen ist es
unfortunately,
möglich.
we cannot continue entertain more questions. Because you will have access to the speakers here, the people here in the room, during the remainder of the conference. So we will have a cultural event later. And now I turn the word to Helga Zeppler-Rosch.
Geht das? Ja, also es hat sich bei mir, ich glaube, das geht vielen im Saal.
I think many in this room have a similar experience. If you listen to all these presentations, there's a lot of pain assembling, adding up, because there are all these crises and they add up to each other. We have this nuclear danger, and if I think about that, I can hardly. Sometimes I wake up at 3 o'clock at night and I switch on the news to see what is happening. I know I shouldn't do that, but such is life. I don't know what Dr. Schöttle said. With that policy, we're destroying everything that has been built after the World War II. And if you think about that, seriously, you can't sleep either. If you look at the education system, our country of thinkers and poets has become a country of idiots. If you look at the 20-year-olds, if you ask them, what do you know about Leibniz? They say that's the cookie from Hanover. All this is creating a lot of pain for me, but I've been in politics for more than 50 years. Now don't calculate my age. I have so many battles, lived through so many battles, the question of nuclear power. We have defended and supported nuclear power from the beginning. My husband is a true genius. Yes, many things that he understood is the connection between the energy flux, the energy density within the production process and the population potential of the planet. So if you reduce energy flux densities from nuclear power to solar, you reduce the population potential that can be supported on Earth. And it is very clear, both my husband and myself, which both joined the political process for the same motive. My husband, during the Second World War, he saw what the British did in India to the Indian population, and he had the idea that the West must end underdevelopment through technological cooperation. And then I made my tour to Africa and China, and I saw how easy it would be to overcome poverty if there is political will to do that. So we had a positive concept to how to sort out the world. And then we have seen how the oligarchy in the early 70s, spreading concepts like the Club of Rome, who said we have reached the limits of resources, we need zero population growth, zero economic growth, and that is how they created the green movement. We have watched how the greenies developed, and we have seen how matters on Forrester, they were frauds. They created a computer program that was supposed to create the result that they presented. And they, in the forward, they say that they ignored the technological factors, how they change the economic relations. So they eliminated technological and scientific development from the whole thing, because they wanted to have an argument to take out science and technology. We have in 1977 organized a pro-nuclear rally with more than 70,000 trade unions, which was then the trade union leadership tried to sabotage it a bit by giving out free beer and similar things. And then we saw how the Lebanon was destroyed in the 1980s. Then, and there was one country after another. And whenever some issue was a hot issue, and for that time the people went on this, could be mobilized to go on the street. Then half a year later, the issue went to the background, and then these people, this group, faded into the background. And for the half century of politics that I was involved in, we've seen that what we have, we need a fundamental opposition, which we started 50 years ago, because we were relating to the whole and not only to some issue. And the problem with the people who most people just look at the issue which concerns them immediately, but then they ignore what is going in Ukraine, or they support the Palestinians, but they don't like Putin. And you have an endless list of things that the peace movement that is dividing the peace movement and other groups that should be united. So in the process of this development, we've decided we need a movement of world citizens. I have to admit, from Trier, there's another famous person who came from there who said the proletarians of all countries should unite. And I decided as a woman from Trier to change this and say, world citizens of the world, unite. So this is the point that we've reached in the world history. For the first time, we're all sitting in the same boat. In earlier times, some culture could go under, like the Roman Empire vanished, while in India there was a Gupta civilization had a flower, and they didn't know about each other. Now humanity is in one boat. We have nuclear weapons that can destroy the whole world civilization. Dr. Postol has given us several presentations where he very clearly and unnegatable demonstrated that if one nuclear power, nuclear missile is used, then the logic of war means that all of these weapons will be used. Half a year ago, he was in Berlin and said if there is a nuclear, one side uses one nuclear bomb, if within 5 years, all nuclear bombs will be used. And that is my objection to what Mr. Karaganov said, is Russia, who said, just throw a bomb to demonstrate that we are serious. If we're at a point where through the internet, nuclear danger, COVID and similar threats, we will not find a solution for one of these problems. We need a solution for all of these problems. So that's why I wrote the 10 principles of a new security and development architecture as a starting point for a debate or reflections about that. But we need a movement of world citizens. Now, obviously, you don't have to know everything about everything in order to start. But the important thing is that you put the fate of humanity up front and put everything else below that priority. And that makes we have to come to an agreement that the international peace movement and the movement of world citizens, if we succeed in uniting them, then we'll have a global majority. The global majority represents 85% of the world population. And that is what we have to achieve. If we in the industrial nations, in Europe and in the United States, we may not like that, but you cannot ignore the United States. We need a movement of people in Europe who approach the global South and say, we need to cooperate with you. And the global South must be encouraged to talk with one voice. As long as the BRICS tolerate that they're divided, that the different countries let themselves be lured into cooperation with others to divide. So there was the Epstein class, the parasitical people. So there are a few thousand billionaires who are trying to become trillionaires. So they have some dinner, and then they use a few little girls, and then they have negotiate deals destroying whole countries. And this is moral decay. That is what is controlling politics in the West. That's the reason why wars are being started. That's why they say you have to invest into Rheinmetall to gain on the stock markets. This kind of immorality can only be overcome if we build a movement of world citizens, because we will not survive if we don't do that. And I believe that the attempt of NATO and other organizations to destroy the cognitive capacities of the humanity, and the only way means against that is to develop your own creativity, and you have to decide that that is more important than anything else. And Nicholas von Kues said in the Middle Ages that in order to be able to know anything, you have to have a pre-knowledge about what you're looking for. Otherwise, you just have information, but you don't know if that is the information that you're looking for. So the pre-knowledge is what tells me that what I find is indeed what I was looking for. So I know there's many people would feel overpowered if you demand from them but you just have to have your heart on the right place. And we have to start with those people, and we don't start today. We have contacts all over the world, and we have to bring them together. And we're looking in a short term, in a big crisis, which will create a lot of anxiety. We will experience crises that really threaten the existence of humanity. But my request is that you, after this conference, work with us. If we just succeed in getting all these private podcasters, we need to develop a network of podcasters and global South media. There are many journalists, honest journalists in South America, in Africa, in Asia, and we have to unite them. And I think that can be done, but the precondition is that we need enough people to join the fight. Thank you.
Ja. Vielen Dank. Vielen Dank, Helga. Und damit beende ich jetzt offiziell den zweiten Panel. Nochmals, 19 Uhr geht es hier weiter mit einem wunderbaren Kulturprogramm. In der Zwischenzeit können Sie den IBI-Kurs zum Beispiel studieren. Das ist das Kulturmagazin des Schiller-Instituts.
Thank you very much, Helga. I end the second panel right now.